Have you ever wondered about the secrets objects can hold, secrets that span centuries and whisper untold stories? Welcome to Unearthed Secrets, the channel where we explore the most mysterious artifacts and the hidden histories behind them. Before we begin, please hit subscribe and like, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. The lantern that never found darkness. Long before the hum of modern cities and the soft flicker of electric lights, in a Japan where forests whispered ancient secrets and rivers wound like silver threads through shadowed valleys, there existed a lantern unlike any other, crafted in the Edo period, during a time of rigid hierarchies and quiet, meticulous artistry. It was not merely a source of light, but a vessel of something far older, something that seemed to resist the very darkness it was meant to banish. The story begins in a small town nestled in the mountains, where monks and villagers alike revered the natural world with a reverence that bordered on awe. The lantern itself was said to have been forged by a master bronze smith, whose name has been lost to time. Legends whisper that he worked not only with skill but with something approaching obsession, spending nights in the glow of molten metal, pouring not just bronze but intention into every curve and hollow of the piece. By the time it was finished, the lantern had a weight to it that seemed disproportionate, as if it carried a presence of its own, a quiet insistence that demanded to be noticed. Unlike ordinary lanterns, this one did not merely illuminate. When lit, it cast shadows that moved against the logic of the room, bending and twisting as though they had wills of their own. A villager lighting it for the first time noticed the shadows lingered long after the flame had been extinguished, stretching into corners that should have remained dark, curling into shapes that were neither entirely human nor animal. Some swore they saw the forms of ancestors, spirits trapped between worlds, wandering in silent circles beneath the eaves of their houses. What made the lantern most peculiar, however, was its refusal to encounter darkness. Stories tell that no matter the hour, no matter how deep the night, the lantern seemed to carry a glow, even when unlit. Travelers passing through the mountain town would find themselves mesmerized by its subtle luminescence, a gentle yet insistent light that hinted at hidden knowledge, secrets lingering just beyond perception. In some accounts, the lantern was described as humming softly, a barely audible vibration that resonated not through the air, but through the bones of those who lingered too close, compelling them to look, to listen, to remember something they had never known. As years passed, the lantern moved from home to home, often gifted or inherited within families who sensed its peculiar power. Each keeper reported similar phenomena: shadows that obeyed no natural law, a glow that existed without flame, and occasionally, a quiet voice that seemed to speak from the bronze itself. It did not communicate in words but in impressions, faint impressions that could not always be articulated. Some felt sorrow, others curiosity, and a few, an unexplainable foreboding. And yet, no one could bring themselves to destroy it. Attempts to melt it down or bury it proved futile. The lantern, it seemed, would always find its way back to the living, or perhaps, the living would always find their way to it. One account, preserved in a faded scroll stored within a Kyoto temple, describes a scholar who became obsessed with the lantern. He carried it into the dense bamboo forests at night, attempting to measure its luminance, to chart the movement of its shadows, to understand the hum that seemed woven into its very structure. Days turned into nights, nights into weeks. The villagers who knew him whispered that he began to walk in the forests as if in a trance, guided solely by the lantern's glow. When they finally found him, he was seated beneath an ancient cedar, the lantern beside him, still burning despite no visible flame. His eyes were open but unseeing, and when he spoke, it was not in words but in questions. Questions about time, about the boundaries of life and death, about why the darkness could not touch the lantern, and why, perhaps, the lantern did not wish to be touched by darkness. Over time, the lantern became a legend, its story entwined with folklore and fear. Some said it was blessed by the kami, spirits who sought to preserve knowledge beyond the reach of mortal men. Others whispered it had been cursed, a vessel of something that had glimpsed the void and refused to return. Monks who studied it in quiet temples claimed it could reveal the unseen world, though at a cost. Those who stared too long might see glimpses of a reality that unsettled the mind, a world where shadows lived independently and where light and dark no longer obeyed reason. In the Edo period, lanterns were ordinary objects, symbols of festivals, guidance for travelers, or simple tools to illuminate one's path. Yet this lantern was different. Artisans and collectors who came across it noted its unique patina, the subtle lines etched across its surface as if by the hand of time itself, rather than mere tools. Some reported that the patterns shifted when one was not looking directly, a secret language written not in ink or bronze but in perception. The curious and the brave found themselves drawn to it, each encounter leaving an indelible mark upon memory, a resonance that lingered long after they left the presence of its light. During particularly long nights, when the wind carried leaves like murmuring voices and the river nearby reflected the moon in fractured, trembling images, the lantern seemed to glow more brightly, as though it had a pulse, a heartbeat of its own. Some suggested it was feeding not on oil or flame, but on attention itself, drawing from the awareness of those who observed it. Those who had stared too long reported a strange sensation of falling, of being both nowhere and everywhere, as though the lantern served as a portal, not to another place, but to a dimension of perception beyond human comprehension. One family, charged with its safekeeping for generations, recounted an encounter with a wandering monk who claimed that the lantern was older than memory, older even than the Edo period itself. He said that it had witnessed the rise and fall of empires, that it had been present in moments that shaped history, not as an instrument of fate, but as a silent observer, and perhaps this was why it could never find darkness. The lantern existed not in opposition to night, but as a testament to the persistence of attention, of awareness, of presence. Light was not merely emitted, it was lived, remembered and recalled across centuries. Eventually, the lantern found its way into a private collection, away from the village, away from the forests, placed on a polished wooden shelf where it gleamed silently under the careful curation of its new owner. Yet even in this controlled environment, the lantern behaved as it always had. It refused to sit quietly in shadow. It refused to be mere bronze. Visitors claimed that late at night, when the house was silent, the lantern's faint glow would stretch across the room, forming shapes on the floor, along the walls, over the objects nearby. They said that sometimes it seemed to hum, a quiet vibration that set teeth to tingling, hearts to racing, and thoughts to wandering in directions unbidden. To see it was to know that the lantern was alive in a way that could not be explained. Alive not in flesh, but in perception, in awareness, in a subtle resistance to finality. Historians and scholars have debated its origins, its purpose, its method of illumination. Scientific inquiry has attempted to measure its glow, to account for its perpetual luminescence, to understand the shadows it cast, but the lantern defied categorization. It was part object, part presence, part memory, and part enigma. And so, through centuries, the lantern that never found darkness has persisted, a symbol of curiosity and obsession, of human desire to illuminate what is hidden, and perhaps of the futility of fully understanding that which resists explanation. Its light endures, not as fire, not as electricity, but as a reminder that some objects are more than objects. They are witnesses, they are questions, they are portals to what might exist beyond the limits of perception, always glowing, always waiting, and never allowing the dark to claim them completely. In the quiet moments when the world sleeps and the moon casts its pale glow over the land, the lantern waits still. It waits for those who dare to see, not merely with eyes, but with attention, with awareness, with the understanding that some lights are eternal, not because they burn, but because they persist. In its glow, shadows become alive, stories untold, unfold, and the line between reality and legend dissolves, leaving only the soft, unwavering presence of a lantern that never, and perhaps can never, find darkness. The bell that counted the stars. In the heart of medieval France, where the mists of early morning clung to cobblestone streets and the scent of damp earth and worn stone filled the air, there stood the Abbey of Saint-Germain. Its spires and arches reached toward the heavens, but among the holy relics and sacred chambers, there existed a bell unlike any other, a bell said to count the stars, not merely to ring and summon monks to prayer, nor to toll for the passing of time, but to somehow perceive the vast silent heavens above and translate their infinite dance into sound. The bell itself was enormous, forged in the late 12th century by a master bellmaker whose name has been lost to the shadows of history. Some accounts suggest it took 7 years to cast, with molten bronze drawn from distant mines, mixed with metals from across the kingdom, and poured under incantations whispered by priests and alchemists alike. The resulting bell was heavy beyond reason, its surface etched with patterns that seemed to shimmer differently in candlelight, twisting as if alive, a map not of the earth but of the cosmos itself. Legend holds that when the bell first rang, its tone resonated differently from ordinary bronze. Each toll corresponded not to hours or minutes but to points of light scattered across the night sky. A toll for a bright star, a whisper for a dim one, a vibration that traced the movements of planets unseen. Those who listened found themselves enveloped in the sensation that time had bent, that the bell had become a bridge between Earth and the infinite, a translation of the universe's quiet music into vibrations they could feel and hear. Monks of the abbey recorded these effects with both awe and fear. Some claimed that when the bell tolled at midnight, it produced visions of the heavens' order, constellations spinning in precise rhythms, stars pulsing like distant hearts. Others felt a weight upon their chests, a reminder that the universe is vast, and that mortality is but a fleeting note in the symphony of eternity. The bell's sound was not merely heard, it was remembered, internalized, and carried by those who listened. leaving impressions that lingered long after the final echo had faded. It was said that the bell had its own mind. Attempts to silence it, to move it into storage or restrain its ringing, proved futile. Those who tried either fell ill with sudden fever or found themselves wandering the abbey at night, hearing the toll echo in corridors empty for hours. Some who dared touch the bell described feeling vibrations that ran up their arms and into their hearts, as though it knew them, as though it were counting not only stars but observers, souls present and absent, living and departed. Travelers from nearby villages and distant towns would journey to the abbey, not for mass or pilgrimage, but to hear the bell. They would wait in the dark cloisters listening for its tone, hoping to glimpse, even for a moment, the sky translated into sound. One account tells of a young astronomer who, after several nights beneath the bell's echoes, began charting constellations no one had yet named. His notebooks, filled with sketches and calculations, hinted that the bell's resonance could reveal patterns unseen by mortal eyes, hidden relationships in the cosmos, rhythms that predated the abbey itself. And yet, the bell was capricious. Some nights, its tolls produced nothing but silence, leaving the listener in a strange state of suspended anticipation. Shadows seemed to gather around it, moving as though guided by invisible currents, responding to the bell's latent energy. It was on such nights that the abbey became a place of quiet unease, where monks would whisper of forces that dwell just beyond perception, and villagers would avoid the stone walls that held the bell. For the bell did not merely count stars, it reminded all who approached that the universe continues, indifferent to human plans, vast beyond imagination, and eternally in motion. Through centuries of wars, revolutions, and decay, the bell survived. When the French Revolution threatened abbeys and monasteries, the Saint-Germain bell was spared, hidden within a crypt where only a few dared venture. Those few who descended into the stone shadows reported that the bell seemed to hum, even when untold, a subtle vibration that mirrored the night sky, a gentle counting of stars hidden above the clouds in centuries. Scholars of the 19th century recorded attempts to understand the bell scientifically, measuring its vibrations, its acoustic properties, its resonance in the stone chambers. They noted unusual phenomena. The sound would carry farther than physics predicted. Notes would linger after the bell ceased, and vibrations would sometimes appear in places not directly in line with the bell. Some suggested that the patterns traced by the sound could map celestial positions, a bell as both instrument and observatory. Yet the bell's full function remained elusive. It was as if it existed on the boundary between art, science, and the mystical, resisting simple categorization. Among the most persistent legends was that of a novice monk who, one cold winter night, climbed to the bell's tower alone. He had been instructed never to ring it outside the appointed hours, yet curiosity, or perhaps destiny, drove him to touch the rope. When he pulled, the sound was not as he expected. It rang once, softly, and the air itself seemed to shimmer. The stars above the abbey appeared to pulse in rhythm with the bell's tone. For a few minutes the monk saw the sky, as though he were floating among it, moving past constellations and planets, witnessing their silent ballet. When he descended, he was changed. He spoke little, and those who tried to follow his gaze felt their minds drawn toward the distant heavens, haunted by the bell's memory. Modern visitors to the abbey, even those unaware of the full legends, feel a subtle presence in the bell tower. At night, when the abbey is empty and the wind whispers through arches and cloisters, some swear they can hear the faint toll of the bell, counting stars invisible to the naked eye, vibrating with a rhythm older than stone or humanity. Photographs of the bell sometimes show peculiar distortions in light and shadow, shapes that appear and vanish between exposures, like echoes of the heavens themselves. What makes the bell extraordinary is not its age, or its weight, or even its artistry, though all of these are remarkable. It is the idea that something crafted by human hands can, in a quiet and persistent way, interact with the cosmos itself. That sound, vibration, and form can converge to create an instrument that does not merely call people to prayer, but calls attention to the vastness beyond human understanding. The Abbey of Saint-Germain Bell reminds all who hear or touch it that the universe is alive with patterns, rhythms, and presences we can barely perceive, and that some objects, even those made by mortal hands, are touched by forces far greater than we can name. And so, through centuries of wind, rain, war, and peace, the bell endures. It counts the stars silently, patiently, sometimes heard, sometimes not, always reminding the world that human perception is fleeting, but the cosmos is eternal. Its toll is not just a sound. It is a resonance of time, a reflection of the infinite, a reminder that some mysteries endure because they are not meant to be solved, only experienced, contemplated, and remembered. In the quiet moments of night, when the air is still and the mind is receptive, the Abbey of Saint-Germain Bell tolls in memory and presence. Each note carries the weight of centuries, the light of countless stars, and the subtle hum of forces older than the abbey itself. To listen is to become part of its counting, to feel the rhythm of the heavens echoing softly through stone and bronze, and to understand, if only for a fleeting moment, that some creations do not merely exist, they participate in the eternal dance of the universe. The bell waits still, in its tower, counting stars that will never be counted by human eyes, resonating in silence and in memory, a monument to the hidden patterns that surround us, and to the mysteries that endure long after names are forgotten and walls crumble. The spear that whispered names. In the vast plains of southern Mesopotamia, where the Tigris and Euphrates braid their way through ancient soil, there lies the city of Ur, cradle of kings, priests and scribes, a city whose mud-brick walls have long since crumbled, but whose echoes linger in the sand. Amidst the ruins of temples, ziggurats and marketplaces, one relic stands out, not for its size or its gleaming craftsmanship, but for the strange whispers that have long surrounded it. A spearhead, crafted during the Ur III period, that is said to whisper the names of those it touches. The spear itself is deceptively simple, bronze, worn to a patina of green and brown, with a shaft that has long since perished, leaving only the sharp tip. Yet when lifted, held, or even placed in its display case, some claim that the air around it quivers as though anticipating the presence of someone long gone. Legends hold that it was forged in the workshops of Ur's artisans during the reign of Shulgi, over 4,000 years ago, and that it was not merely a weapon but a vessel for memory, a recorder of lives and deeds. It was in battle, the stories say, that the spear revealed its peculiar power. Warriors who wielded it claimed that they could hear faint, almost imperceptible utterances, names of allies, enemies, ancestors and kings long buried. Some said these whispers were warnings, others claimed they were recollections of the fallen, and a few, in hushed tones, believed that the spear had absorbed the very souls of those who had crossed its path. The metal itself seemed alive, attuned to human presence, vibrating faintly in the hand as if recognizing the holder. Archaeologists who unearthed the spear in the mid-20th century found it in a ceremonial pit, alongside clay tablets, pottery, and offerings. The positioning suggested it was not discarded carelessly, but placed deliberately, perhaps as a votive object, perhaps as a memorial. When researchers first examined it, they noted the craftsmanship. The tip was leaf-shaped, perfectly balanced, with intricate patterns etched along the edges, symbolic markings that some speculate encoded names, events, or even incantations. The metal hummed faintly under certain lighting, producing an almost musical vibration that seemed impossible for an inanimate object. Curators and scholars who handled the spear in later years reported subtle, inexplicable phenomena. Some heard faint whispers in the dead of night, soft as a breath, echoing a syllable or a name they could not quite place. Others described the sensation of being watched, not by a person, but by the weight of history itself, pressing through the bronze and into their awareness. In one account, a researcher traced the spear's tip along a line of cuneiform inscriptions, and the room seemed to resonate as if the metal were reading the writing aloud, though no words left his lips. The Ur III period, it is said, was an era steeped in ritual and record-keeping. Kings like Shulgi demanded meticulous accounting of lives, property, and offerings, and priests chronicled events with devotion that bridged the human and divine. In this context, the spear may have been more than a weapon. It may have been a tool of remembrance, a sacred object imbued with the intention to carry the names of the living and the dead, to preserve them in metal so that they could never be truly forgotten. Local legends add layers of mystery to the artifact. Villagers speak of a figure seen near the ruins of Ur at dusk, carrying a spearhead that murmurs in the wind. Travelers who have walked the fields claim that, if you stand still long enough, faint names are spoken across the plain, names of forgotten rulers, of soldiers lost in mud and river, of scribes who recorded with painstaking care the rise and fall of dynasties. Some whisper that the spear remembers not just human names, but the names of the land itself, canals, walls, temples, and the creatures that once roamed these fertile plains. It is said that the spear does not speak indiscriminately. Those with no connection to Ur, to its history, hear only silence. But those whose blood traces even faintly back to Mesopotamia, or perhaps those who are deeply attuned to memory, history, or intuition, can perceive its whispers. In this way, the spear functions almost as a mirror, reflecting the ties between present and past, reminding listeners of continuity across millennia. Throughout the centuries, the spear has been moved, preserved, and displayed in various collections, yet each time, the strange phenomena persist. Conservators have noted that when it is cleaned or polished, the whispers grow more insistent, more articulate, almost as if the act of tending to it awakens the memories contained within. It is said that touching the tip while the bell of evening tolls, or when the sun is low on the horizon, can evoke visions of processions, battles, and ceremonies from earthly times. Shadows of figures in ceremonial robes seem to flicker along the walls, and some who witness this claim that the spear speaks in a voice that is both theirs and not theirs, a chorus of the past and present intertwined. Scholars have tried to explain the whispers scientifically, invoking acoustics, vibration, and psychological suggestion, yet the phenomenon remains largely unexplainable. Tests reveal no electronic devices, no hidden mechanisms. The metal is ordinary bronze with no alloying that should produce sound or resonance beyond its normal tonal qualities, even when isolated from all external stimuli. Witnesses report hearing faint utterances, barely perceptible, as though the metal itself retains the echoes of thousands of names from long ago. The spear's influence extends beyond the auditory. Some who have studied it for extended periods report dreams populated by Earth's citizens, scribes writing meticulously in cuneiform, soldiers marching along mud brick walls, priests chanting in temple courtyards. These visions, vivid yet fleeting, often convey emotion and tension, as though the spear acts not only as a vessel for memory, but as a bridge into the lives of those it remembers. Time in these dreams flows differently, expanding and contracting, allowing the observer to glimpse multiple eras simultaneously. It is tempting to dismiss the whispers as legend, a psychological echo induced by the grandeur of Earth's ruins, the aura of ancient craftsmanship, or the power of suggestion. Yet those who have been near the spear describe a weight of history that is undeniable. The bronze seems to carry intent, as if it were aware of its own past and of those who now encounter it. The inscriptions along its blade, subtle and flowing, are not merely decorative, they are mnemonic, a language of memory designed to persist through centuries, a way for names to endure long after paper, clay, or flesh has vanished. Local lore hints that the spear may choose its keeper. Stories tell of museum staff, curators, or archaeologists who, after extended contact, develop an obsession with names, inscriptions, genealogies, or histories that they had never studied before. Some experience uncanny familiarity with long-forgotten rulers or soldiers whose names appear nowhere in surviving records. These experiences are often subtle, a sudden knowledge, a whispered syllable remembered at a critical moment, a dream too vivid to dismiss. The spear that whispered names endures as a relic, not only of war, but of memory, of the human desire to be remembered and to remember. It is an instrument of both silence and voice, bridging the temporal divide between earthly rulers and the modern observer. In its presence, one cannot help but consider the ephemeral nature of human life, the persistence of memory, and the mysterious ways in which history speaks to those willing to listen. And so it rests, in careful display, in the quiet halls of a museum. Yet it is never truly silent. Those sensitive to its resonance report a subtle vibration in the air, a fleeting breath across the ear, a whisper of a name half remembered. Each utterance is an echo of centuries past, a soft, persistent reminder that lives, deeds and identities are never entirely lost. They linger in metal, in memory, and in the stories we tell, waiting to be heard again. Through centuries of turmoil, wars, floods, and neglect, the spear survives. It remains a witness to Or's grandeur, a vessel for names, and a bridge between past and present. In the quiet, beneath low light and still air, the whispering continues. Names rise softly from the bronze, and those who listen feel a connection to a world long gone, yet still very much alive in the hum of memory. To hold the spear is to hold history itself. It is not merely bronze, not merely a weapon, but a conduit to an age when kings ruled, scribes wrote, and every life, no matter how small, was marked in the flowing tides of time. And as it whispers, faint as a breeze through ancient corridors, it reminds us that the past is never truly gone. It is alive, folded into objects, etched into the earth, and murmuring quietly in a bronze spearhead, waiting for those willing to hear the names it guards so faithfully. Even now, in a quiet gallery, with lights dimmed and the hum of visitors fading, the spear that whispered names continues its soft, unceasing vigil. It counts no hours, measures no distance, and observes no law of man. Instead it whispers names, the names of those who lived, those who fell, those who sought to be remembered, and those who through its bronze memory will endure, softly, eternally, in the space between breath and silence. The skull that remembered dreams. High in the clouded canopies of the Andean mountains, where mist drapes itself over jagged cliffs and winds whisper through narrow valleys, there lived a civilization known as the Chachapoya, the warriors of the clouds. Few remained to tell their stories, for their cities were swallowed by forests, and their stone fortresses clung precariously to cliffsides, hidden from the eyes of passing time. Yet among the relics they left behind, one object evokes both fascination and unease: a human skull, intricately treated and preserved, known to those who have encountered it as the skull that remembered dreams. The Chachapoya burial skulls, called tampu, are unlike any others in the world. Unlike simple skeletal remains, these skulls were prepared with care, their surfaces often smoothed, reinforced with resin, painted, or adorned with textile wrappings. Many bear geometric patterns, lines etched delicately into bone, as though marking them for purposes beyond mere ritual. But what sets this skull apart is not decoration, nor its age, but the stories it seems to tell. Silent narratives, heard only in sleep or in quiet contemplation, whispers of dreams long past, echoing across centuries. Discovered in a burial chamber, atop a cliff overlooking the cloud forest, the skull rested among offerings, ceramic vessels, quivers of arrows, beads of bone and shell, and small figurines whose purposes remain enigmatic. The chamber itself was carved carefully from rock, with niches for bodies, and an altar that suggested ceremonial rites unknown to outsiders. When first unearthed, the skull appeared ordinary, yet those who handled it reported a peculiar sensation, a subtle heaviness in the hands, a pressure at the temples, as though it carried the weight of consciousness long vanished. Anthropologists and archaeologists have speculated on the Chachapoya's practices. It is known that they revered the dead, believing that the spirits lingered to watch over the living. Yet this skull seems to extend beyond spiritual guardianship. Those who have spent time near it report dreams that are unusually vivid, layered with narrative, and tinged with an uncanny familiarity. In these dreams, one is not merely an observer, but an unwitting participant, walking through cloud-wrapped cities, standing upon stone terraces where ceremonies unfold, glimpsing the faces of the long-dead Chachapoya as if they were alive once more. The skull's memory is said to be selective. Not all who sleep near it experience dreams, and those who do often report that the visions are personal, tailored to the dreamer's own fears, hopes, or memories. A researcher may dream of a long-lost library of Andean lore. A visitor may encounter the cliffs and canopies themselves, twisting and folding in impossible ways, echoing the contours of the skull's memory. The whispers, faint and half-formed, are carried on the edges of awareness, names, fragments of song, rituals repeated silently, and occasionally a warning, soft, urgent, and unplaceable. Some speculate that the skull's ability to remember stems from Chachapoya ritual practices. Cranial modification was known among them, shaping and elongating heads as a mark of status or devotion. Certain skulls were treated with resins, oils, and pigments, designed not merely for preservation but as a conduit between the physical and spiritual worlds. Perhaps the skull acts as a vessel, a repository for dreamscapes, absorbing the subconscious thoughts, fears, and aspirations of those it was buried with, and transmitting them across centuries to the living. The chamber where it was found is itself mysterious. Its walls are lined with inscriptions, weathered and undeciphered, and carvings of faces that seem to shift when viewed from different angles. The placement of the skull within the niche suggests intent. It was not a haphazard burial, but a deliberate act of consecration, a way to link the dead to the living, memory to experience, and dreams to reality. Visitors have remarked that the air around the chamber is unusually still, charged with a kind of latent energy, as if the skull's presence alters perception subtly, bending the mind toward reverie. Over decades, researchers who have interacted with the skull report subtle changes in themselves. Dreams become more vivid, memory sharpens, and intuition seems heightened. Some even claim to perceive names, faces, or events not recorded in history, as though the skull carries fragments of lost narratives. One anthropologist described waking from a dream in which he walked along a cliffside city of stone and mist, attended a festival in honor of a Chachapoya leader, and saw a figure, long deceased, turn and whisper his name, though he had no connection to the ancient people beyond his research. The skull itself shows evidence of this passage of memory. Microscopic examination reveals traces of organic material, pigments, and compounds that may have been applied in ritual practice. Small fissures and wear patterns suggest frequent handling, perhaps in ceremonies or offerings over generations. Some Chachapoya burials indicate repeated visitation by family members, suggesting that the skull was not simply a static relic but an active participant in social and spiritual life. The energy that some modern observers feel may therefore be an echo of centuries of interaction, layered like sediment in the delicate bone. What is particularly unsettling is the notion of selective memory. Dreams evoked by the skull are never identical for two observers. They respond to the observer's mind, creating narratives that are simultaneously foreign and familiar. Visitors often describe a sensation of recognition, of names, places, and events that they cannot consciously place. Some dream of landscapes that twist and shift, mirroring the topography of the Andes but infused with impossible angles, stairways that lead nowhere, and plazas that fold into themselves. It is as if the skull stores not only the memory of those interred, but also the collective dream of the civilization, folding it into a multi-dimensional archive. Legends among local communities suggest that the Chachapoya believed the dead could enter dreams to communicate warnings or guidance. Children told stories of ancestors whispering through the mists, warning hunters of falling cliffs, or guiding travelers along hidden paths. Shamans used skulls in ritual, holding them to channel visions or to interpret omens. It is plausible that the skull's uncanny influence today is a residual effect of these practices, a bridge that carries both memory and foresight across time. Even scientific inquiry has been challenged by the skull. Neurologists and anthropologists have attempted to study the dream-inducing properties using EEGs, sensory isolation, and sleep observation, yet results are inconclusive. Subjects report dreams of remarkable clarity, often involving landscapes, people, or events unknown to them, yet no objective measure can capture the full experience. The phenomenon is at once psychological, spiritual, and physical, defying categorization. Those who have slept near the skull often describe a feeling of companionship with the dead, a subtle comfort mixed with unease. The skull seems to transmit more than imagery. It conveys emotion, intention, and memory. Some report fleeting whispers of song, half-heard chants, or laughter that disappears when attention is focused. Others sense the presence of someone or something watching, not malevolently, but expectantly, as if awaiting recognition or acknowledgement. The skull that remembered dreams endures as a testament to the Chachapoya, their ingenuity, and their belief in the permeability of life and death, dream and reality. It reminds us that memory need not be confined to paper or stone, that consciousness and experience may persist beyond the body, carried delicately in the curves and hollows of bone. Even in the modern world, amid museum lights, glass cases, and careful documentation, the skull retains its strange vitality. Dreams of cloud-wrapped cities, cliffside fortresses, and ceremonies of mist and stone continue to emerge in the minds of those sensitive to its presence. Names, fragments of song, glimpses of people long gone, they appear, dissolve and reappear, leaving observers with the haunting awareness that some part of history is always alive, waiting, whispering softly from a Chachapoya cliffside, through the hollow of a bone, across centuries of time. To look upon the skull that remembered dreams is to confront not only the ingenuity of a vanished people, but the persistence of memory itself. It is a reminder that dreams are bridges, that the past is never truly lost, and that in the quiet, in the haze of sleep, the skull continues its vigil, offering visions, whispers, and the faint echo of lives remembered and never forgotten. And so it waits, nestled in shadowed display, allowing only the willing to experience its gift. Names, visions, and stories rise faintly, carried on the edge of perception, a tapestry woven from centuries of thought, ritual, and hope. Those who listen, who lie quietly in the presence of this ancient relic, may find themselves traveling beyond time, beyond understanding, to the heart of a civilization whose dreams still speak, softly, endlessly, in the hollow of a single ancient skull. Even now, in the hush of a gallery, when footsteps fade and lights dim, the whispers continue, faint, intricate, layered with emotion and history. They move like the Andean mist, curling and folding over the observer, inviting them into dreams that are both personal and shared, fleeting and eternal. The skull that remembered dreams endures not only as a relic, but as a keeper of memory, a witness to lives long gone, and a subtle, persistent guide through the shadowed corridors of the subconscious, where history and imagination entwine, and where dreams remember what we often cannot. The crown that spoke in flames. In the heart of the Indian subcontinent, where the sun blazes over marble palaces, and the air hums with the echoes of centuries, there exists a crown unlike any other, the crown that spoke in flames. Crafted during the height of the Mughal Empire, a period of extraordinary artistry and unyielding ambition, this crown was not merely a symbol of authority, it was a vessel of presence, a relic imbued with power, legend, and, as some claim, a voice that could not be silenced. The Mughal emperors were patrons of art and devotion, blending Persian refinement with Indian grandeur. Their treasuries overflowed with gold, jewels, and objects designed to awe and inspire. But this crown stood apart, forged from the purest gold, its surface adorned with rubies that gleamed like captured fire, emeralds that shimmered with deep green life, and diamonds that refracted sunlight into rainbows of delicate flame. It was as much a work of magic as of metalwork. Legends tell that the crown was created not only for coronation but as a repository of imperial energy. The artisans who labored over it were said to chant, weave spells, and invoke the blessings of deities with every strike of hammer against gold. It was believed that the crown could speak in a manner beyond words, communicating with its wearer, influencing decisions, and echoing the will of the empire itself. The very flames etched into its surface were said to flicker when the crown sensed the presence of those unworthy, dancing in silent admonition or approval. The crown's first wearer, Shah Jahan, the emperor famed for his beauty, ambition, and the creation of the Taj Mahal, reportedly experienced visions while donning it. Some chroniclers describe him as staring into the crown, seeing flames ripple and shift, reflecting images of battles yet to be fought, alliances forming, and betrayals waiting in shadowed corridors. Whether these visions were the product of imagination, ritual intoxication, or the crown's hidden power, they became legend, passed down through generations of courtiers and historians alike. Crafted with intricate filigree, the crown's structure allows it to catch sunlight even in the dim glow of palace chambers. Rubies are placed at angles that create tiny flickers of flame with the movement of the head, producing the illusion of dancing fire. Yet those who have handled the crown, under the careful supervision of museum curators or historical guardians, describe an almost palpable warmth emanating from it, subtle yet persistent, like the ember of a fire long tended. Some even report faint whispers, delicate and unintelligible, at the edge of perception, rising when the mind is quiet and the heart is still. During coronations, the crown was not merely ceremonial. Priests and astrologers would consult it, observing the flicker and angle of its jewels, interpreting them as omens. Court historians recorded that when worn by those deemed virtuous or capable, the flames shimmered brightly, aligned with the wearer's aura. When worn by the indecisive, cruel, or ambitious beyond reason, shadows seemed to gather in the gold, the fire muted, as though the crown itself judged. Tales persist that emperors could make decisions by listening to the crown, allowing the subtle movements of flame and shadow to guide the course of kingdoms. The crown did not survive unscathed. During periods of turmoil, rebellions, and colonial incursions, it was hidden, transported, and occasionally lost. Each time it resurfaced, witnesses described the same uncanny characteristics: a warmth that lingered in the air, an almost imperceptible hum that resonated in the skull and chest, and flames that appeared to flicker with intent, even in the absence of sunlight or torchlight. Historians sometimes dismiss these accounts as myth, but the consistency across centuries suggests something more than rumor. Those who spend time near the crown in modern museums recount subtle phenomena: a tugging at the mind, a fleeting sense of destiny, and dreams where fire dances across marble palaces, courtyards, and secret corridors. Some dream of the emperor himself, seated on a throne of ivory and gold, the crown atop his head, whispering guidance or warnings, sometimes in a language that is both familiar and alien, understood only in the logic of dream. Anthropologists and historians alike speculate on the crown's extraordinary aura. Was it the residue of countless ceremonies, the concentrated focus of devotion and power? Or was it something more? A deliberate enchantment, a creation that melded material and spirit so completely that it carried fragments of consciousness forward across time. The flame patterns etched into gold, aligned with astrological principles and sacred geometry, may have been intended to channel energy, capturing the essence of rulership, wisdom, and vigilance in a physical object. Visitors who sit quietly near the crown report sensory experiences that cannot be fully explained. A slight warmth brushing the fingertips, a sudden awareness of the heartbeat in sync with an invisible rhythm, and sometimes a faint sound, a murmur, like a distant hearth crackling, or the soft exhale of a voice. These experiences are often fleeting, but lingering, leaving a sense that the crown is aware, attentive, waiting, and perhaps guiding. Even its design communicates intent. The arches of gold resemble flames rising to the heavens, the gemstones positioned to catch and amplify light, the intricate patterns of filigree, capturing shadows that shift as the observer moves. It is a crown that commands presence, yet it does not dominate. It interacts, responds, and remembers. Those who have worn replicas report heightened awareness, a strange clarity of thought, or vivid dreams of historical events as though they were witnessing them firsthand. Local legends speak of the crown's voice, a concept that is metaphorical and literal. In some tales, when placed upon the rightful heir, it would speak in the form of warmth, flickers of flame, and images in the mind, visions of prosperity, harmony, or caution. When misused, it would dampen the wearer's spirit, suggesting failure, betrayal, or disaster. It is said that the crown remembers all who wore it, responding not only to merit, but to character, intention, and perhaps even the moral weight carried through generations. The Mughal golden crown remains today a testament to an era of brilliance and intrigue. Preserved in carefully controlled environments, studied meticulously, and admired for its artistry, it still captivates those who approach it. Scholars and visitors alike speak of an ineffable presence, a sense of living history, and a subtle flame that continues to flicker, despite the absence of fire, beyond the reach of the human eye. To stand before the crown that spoke in flames is to encounter more than gold and jewels. It is to feel the resonance of power, devotion, and memory intertwined. It is to sense the continuum of time, the echo of ceremonies long past, the whispers of emperors and artisans alike. And when the room falls silent, when the observer closes their eyes and breathes slowly, the crown seems to speak once more. Not in words, but in flame, warmth, and subtle vision, reminding the world that some relics carry not just history but life, intent, and enduring presence. Even now, centuries later, in a quiet museum chamber or a sunlit hall, the flames remain. They dance just at the edge of perception, hinting at power, judgment, and vigilance. Those who watch carefully may see a flicker, feel a warmth, or experience a dream. And in that moment, the crown continues its silent speech, a reminder that some artifacts do more than survive. They live, they speak, and they remember. The crown that spoke in flames endures as both art and oracle, both relic and witness, a flame-etched testament to the genius, devotion, and subtle power of the Mughal Empire. and if one listens closely, the whispers of fire may yet reach across centuries, carrying messages that are no longer words, but vision, warmth, and the quiet language of flames. The pendant that cried light. In the shadowed halls of Mycenae, where the earth holds the weight of kings and warriors long vanished, there exists a relic both delicate and extraordinary. The pendant that cried light. Crafted in a golden age of Bronze Age Greece, during the flourishing of Mycenaean civilization, this pendant is more than ornamentation. It is a vessel of memory, a whisper of ritual, and a fragment of a world that has long since faded into the folds of history. The Mycenaeans were master artisans, their culture steeped in war, ceremony, and the pursuit of immortality through monuments and treasures. Gold was their language, and the finest metalsmiths could coax it into forms that seemed almost alive, imbued with the sunlight itself. Among the countless treasures unearthed from grave circles and royal tombs, the pendant stands apart, small yet commanding, unassuming, yet imbued with extraordinary presence. Its surface, a fine lattice of gold filigree, glimmers with an otherworldly radiance, catching light in ways that seem impossible, as if the metal itself breathes. Embedded within the pendant are minuscule sapphires and garnets, positioned not merely for decoration, but to capture and refract sunlight and firelight, creating a subtle shifting display of light that seems almost sentient. It is said that, when held just so, the pendant weeps, streams of radiant reflection, tiny beams that quiver and shimmer like tears. Scholars and historians speculate endlessly about its purpose. Some suggest it was a religious object, a token of devotion to a sun deity or a goddess of light and life. Others propose it was a ceremonial talisman, worn by priests or royalty to see omens in the dance of reflected light. Yet the stories passed down through time hint at something more remarkable. The pendant is said to react to the emotions of the wearer, the intentions of those who touch it, and even the atmosphere of the room. Those who have examined it in museums, under careful light and glass protection, report subtle phenomena that defy simple explanation. The pendant seems to shift when unobserved, reflecting glimpses of color where none should appear. A faint warmth radiates from its gold when held in the hand, and some describe fleeting impressions in the mind, visions of palace feasts, torchlit corridors, and the faces of Mycenaean women and men caught mid-ritual, their eyes shimmering with reflected light. Legends tell that the pendant was crafted for a queen, or high priestess, a woman whose gaze and presence could command respect and fear in equal measure. During rituals, she would hold the pendant close to her chest, and the Mycenaean priests believed that the light it cast was not merely physical, but spiritual, tears of illumination that bridged the world of mortals and gods. The pendant became a tool of perception, allowing glimpses into the unseen, future omens, the presence of spirits, and the flow of divine energy through the palace and the land beyond. The pendant's creation involved techniques so refined that modern metallurgists still marvel at them. Tiny grooves and micro-etchings direct the passage of light across the gold surface, while minute gems scatter and refract it to create a shifting, almost liquid shimmer. Some believe the ancients intentionally encoded patterns that would interact with celestial alignments, casting fleeting images at dawn or dusk, as if the pendant itself were reading the path of the sun. Stories of the pendant's powers persisted even as Mycenaean civilization declined. Centuries later, villagers near ancient tombs would whisper of a small golden ornament that could cry in the sunlight, illuminating hidden corners and revealing paths unseen. Archaeologists discovered the pendant amid funerary treasures in a grave circle, its delicate chains coiled like sleeping serpents, untouched for millennia, yet still reflecting a soft ethereal light that seemed almost alive. Modern observers report that the pendant retains a subtle responsiveness. In a quiet room, with light filtered through museum windows, it seems to shimmer with intention, catching reflections in patterns that are never quite random. Some have described it as almost sentient, the gold quivering, the gems sparkling, as if the pendant senses presence, thought, or emotion. Those who study it are often left with the impression that they are being observed in return, not with malice but with quiet awareness, the pendant recording history, experience, and the passage of countless hands. The pendant's symbolism may have extended far beyond mere ceremony. In a culture obsessed with legacy, death, and the divine, such an object could serve as a conduit between the mortal and immortal, a lens through which the mysteries of the universe might be glimpsed. Some myths suggest that when held under sunlight at specific angles, the pendant projects tiny patterns onto surfaces, mapping the movement of stars, the flow of water, or even the trajectory of spirits departing the world. Anthropologists suggest that the Mycenaeans viewed light as a sacred medium, a channel for divine communication. The pendant, in this sense, was not just decoration but a tool for revelation, capturing the fleeting and elusive, making it tangible through gold and gemstone. It preserved moments of illumination, encoded memory in its structure, and reflected the intangible hope, devotion, fear, and the desire to witness eternity itself. Even today, the pendant elicits awe. In museum archives or carefully curated exhibitions, the subtle tears of light seem almost like a heartbeat, a quiet reminder of the long-lost civilization that shaped it. Scholars linger over its details, noting how tiny scratches suggest careful handling, ritual use, and reverence. Visitors sometimes feel a whisper in the mind when observing it, a sensation of watching and being watched simultaneously, as though the pendant preserves not only the light it captures, but the consciousness of those who created it and those who have revered it across centuries. The pendant's design is deceptively simple: a delicate teardrop of gold, filigree etched with miniature sunbursts, chains of gold that sway like vines in a breeze, and a series of tiny, perfectly placed gemstones that capture the essence of flame and dawn. Yet the effect is profound. Light dances, flickers, and pools, creating ephemeral patterns that speak to something beyond form and function. As night falls and museum lights dim, the pendant rests silently, yet its presence remains. A faint reflection may shimmer across the floor, a ghost of sunlight captured centuries ago. For those who linger, watching closely, there is a sense of continuity, a connection to hands long gone, to rituals once performed in marble halls, and to a civilization that sought to enshrine the fleeting and eternal within a single precious object. The pendant's quiet testimony reminds us that even small objects can carry immense power. The pendant that cried light is a bridge between worlds, a vessel of memory, a relic that captures not just light, but the essence of belief, devotion, and the subtle artistry of Mycenaean civilization. To gaze upon it is to witness the echo of flames long extinguished, to sense the pulse of history, and to feel in the shimmer of gold and gem the living heartbeat of a civilization that continues to speak across the millennia. Even now, as scholars examine its surface, and tourists admire its radiance, the pendant's quiet tears of light persist, a reminder that some creations do more than endure. They interact, they observe, and they continue to tell their story, in the language of illumination, bridging past and present with a quiet, unforgettable brilliance. The mask that refused shadows. Deep within the winding tributaries of the Sepik River in Papua New Guinea, where mists cling to the water and the forest exhales secrets, there exists an artifact that defies both understanding and expectation: the mask that refused shadows. Carved by the skilled hands of the Sepik peoples, whose traditions have whispered across centuries, this mask is more than wood and pigment. It is a vessel of presence, a fragment of spirit, and a witness to rites that the modern world barely perceives. The Sepik region is alive with history, ritual, and the continuity of ancestral practice. For generations, communities have carved masks to embody spirits, channel the unseen, and communicate with the forces that govern life and death. Within this cultural tapestry, the mask stands apart, enigmatic in form, defying conventional patterns of light and shadow, seemingly absorbing darkness rather than casting it. Crafted from a single piece of dark, dense wood, the mask's surface is smooth yet alive with texture, etched with undulating lines that trace patterns both geometric and organic. Pigments of red, white, and black streak its form, emphasizing certain contours while leaving others intentionally obscure. What strikes observers immediately is its uncanny ability to interact with light. Unlike ordinary masks, which cast shadows and obscure the features beneath, this mask seems to repel darkness. Light grazes its surface and bends around it, as though the object itself negotiates with the illumination, creating a subtle halo that defies physics and perception. Legends of the Sepik River describe the mask as belonging to a powerful ancestral spirit, a guardian who neither sleeps nor slumbers, existing between worlds. Shamans of the region have recounted that when used in ceremonies, the mask does not merely conceal the wearer's face, it transforms it. Movements become fluid, voices resonate differently, and even the flickering torchlight of the ceremonial house seems to twist and hesitate in its presence. Participants in ritual dances have reported a strange sensation, as if the mask perceives the observer as much as it is perceived, resisting shadow, while drawing attention to its presence. The mask's function is deeply ceremonial. Within the sacred houses along the Sepik, masks serve as intermediaries between the living and the spirits, worn during initiation rites, funerals, and other pivotal communal events. The mask that refused shadows is said to be used for initiation ceremonies of the highest order, for moments when the young were tested against the forces of the spirit world, when courage, perception, and endurance were measured in the quiet of the forest and the flicker of ceremonial fire. Its peculiar interaction with light was thought to reveal truth. It would illuminate hidden intentions, highlight deceit, and grant clarity in matters of life, lineage, and destiny. When scholars first encountered the mask in a remote collection along the Sepik, they were struck by its unusual properties. The wood, though aged and weathered, appeared to maintain a depth and sheen that repelled shadow. Under natural and artificial light, its surface seemed to shimmer subtly, almost breathing in the luminosity, producing a soft, self-generated glow. Anthropologists speculated that the effect was achieved through a combination of expert polishing, resin treatments, and pigment layering, yet even the most meticulous reconstructions fail to reproduce the mask's peculiar aura. The mask also embodies a complex iconography. Carvings of ancestral faces and totemic animals are etched in layers, some shallow, some deep, creating a visual texture that changes with the viewer's perspective. At certain angles, the carvings merge, producing hybrid forms. The face of a spirit may melt into the contour of a bird, or the mouth of an ancestor may align with a crocodile's snout. This interplay of form, light, and shadow, or the mask's refusal thereof, creates a liminal experience. The observer sees both the physical object and the spiritual narrative simultaneously, caught between tangible reality and the realm of memory and myth. Local elders recount stories of those who approached the mask unprepared. In whispered tones, they speak of visitors overwhelmed by a sensation of being watched, a perception of invisible presences, and fleeting visions of past rituals. The mask, it seems, does not merely exist, it interacts. Some describe faint murmurs, almost imperceptible, like the collective memories of generations of wearers resonating from the wood. Others claim that the mask subtly repositions itself when unobserved, as if maintaining its stance in the world, ensuring that no shadow lingers too long, that light always finds its way to its surface. The ceremonial significance of the mask extends beyond mere ritual. It embodies the Celtic worldview, in which human life, nature, and spirit are interwoven. To wear the mask is to step into a liminal state where perception is altered, where one becomes attuned to subtleties imperceptible in ordinary life. The mask's rejection of shadows becomes symbolic. Light triumphs over concealment, truth emerges from obscurity, and the wearer becomes both conduit and observer, partaking in the eternal dialogue between seen and unseen. Even in museum settings far from the humid jungles of Papua New Guinea, the mask's presence persists. Light plays across its surface, revealing patterns that shift as viewers move. Scholars have noted that prolonged observation can produce subtle optical illusions, reinforcing the sense that the mask is alive in perception, responsive to curiosity, and deeply embedded with ritual memory. Some curators have remarked that even when displayed in controlled lighting, the mask never casts conventional shadows. It exists in a delicate balance, a suspended entity that challenges expectations and invites contemplation. The mask's legend has grown beyond its materiality. Among those who study it, there is a quiet acknowledgement that the mask that refused shadows is not just a crafted object, but a repository of cultural memory. It captures the energy of countless ceremonies, the presence of generations of initiates, and the devotion of the artisans who imbued it with life. Its ability to refuse shadows becomes a metaphor for enduring legacy, the persistence of spirit across time, and the uncanny intersection of art, ritual, and perception. In examining the mask closely, one notices the faint traces of pigments, hints of fiber inlays, and tiny incisions that may have served as conduits for spirit energy or simply as artistic flourish. Each detail contributes to its enigmatic quality, the way it responds to light, the subtle curvature of its form, and the intricate symbolism that seems to shift depending on the angle of view or the intent of the observer. It is an object that demands patience, attention, and reverence, a reminder that the most profound artifacts are those that resist immediate understanding, that whisper their stories slowly, persistently, across the quiet passage of time. For those who linger near it, the mask is a bridge to the Celtic's spiritual past. In its glow, one can almost hear the rustle of leaves along the river, the distant chanting of ritual, the soft splash of water against dugout canoes, and the echo of generations of hands that carved, polished, and consecrated it. The mask that refused shadows is not merely seen, it is felt, sensed, and experienced as a living dialogue between light and darkness, past and present, material and spirit. Even now, across centuries and oceans, the mask maintains its enigmatic power. Light plays upon it in subtle, almost imperceptible ways, resisting definition, inviting observation, and holding within it the weight of myth, ritual, and human devotion. To behold it is to confront both the tangible and intangible, to witness an object that is as much a presence as it is a creation, and to understand, even briefly, the enduring artistry and spiritual sophistication of the Celtic River peoples. In the end, the mask remains silent yet eloquent, unyielding yet inviting, a relic that transcends materiality. The mask that refused shadows teaches patience, observation, and respect for the delicate dance between light and dark, reminding us that some creations do more than endure, they observe, respond, and illuminate the spaces where history, spirit, and human imagination converge. The Book That Dreamed in Ink. In a quiet corner of Hungary, in a library that smells of old paper, dust, and centuries of thought, rests a book unlike any other, The Book That Dreamed in Ink, known to scholars and curious wanderers alike as the Rohant Codex. Its origins are shrouded in mystery, its pages inscribed with symbols that defy known language, its purpose lingering on the threshold between reality and imagination. From the moment one gazes upon its aged covers, there is an undeniable sense that this is not merely a manuscript, but a vessel of thought, memory, and something just beyond human comprehension. The codex itself is modest in size, bound in dark, worn leather, its surface mottled with centuries of handling, yet it emanates a quiet presence, a silent insistence that it is to be read, studied, and in some ineffable way, understood. The pages within are thin and fragile, yet the ink seems to have been applied with an almost supernatural permanence, neither fading nor smearing, as if the words themselves possess a life that defies the passage of time. The most striking feature of the Rohung Codex is its writing. The symbols are unlike any alphabet known to historians, linguists, or cryptographers. They curve, loop, and intersect in ways that suggest meaning, yet resist comprehension. Each page is covered in these characters, sometimes accompanied by small illustrations, scenes of processions, battles, rituals, and mysterious geometric designs that hint at a story, a history, or perhaps a philosophy. Though its meaning remains elusive, it is a language that seems to dream on the page, speaking in riddles and half-formed thoughts, as if the ink itself remembers things the author did not intend to tell. For centuries, the Codex baffled scholars. Some believed it to be a clever hoax, a work of playful imagination designed to confound the curious. Others suspected it was an ancient language lost to history, a relic of a forgotten civilization or sect, whose knowledge vanished beneath the sands of time. Attempts to decode it have been met with frustration and fascination alike. Linguists, mathematicians, and cryptographers have all pored over its symbols, yet no one has definitively unlocked its secrets. The illustrations provide tantalizing clues, yet offer no resolution. Tiny figures, carefully drawn, seem to move through landscapes that are both familiar and alien. One page depicts a procession of hooded figures carrying torches, their faces obscured, moving toward an enormous building whose architecture defies logic, with arches and spires that twist impossibly. Another shows a battle where combatants wield weapons that seem part human, part animal, fighting under a sky filled with unfamiliar constellations. Each image seems to hint at a story, a narrative, or a ritual, yet the absence of decipherable text keeps the narrative suspended, caught between meaning and mystery. Legends have grown around the Codex, as they often do with objects that resist understanding. Some claim it was created by a secretive order of monks or alchemists, a repository of esoteric knowledge meant to be protected from the uninitiated. Others whisper that the book is alive in some sense, that its symbols shift subtly over time, as if responding to the observer's gaze, revealing certain patterns while concealing others. It is said that those who spend long hours studying the Codex sometimes report vivid dreams, in which the symbols take on life, moving and forming stories that vanish upon waking, leaving only a lingering sense of revelation just beyond reach. The Codex has traveled through history as quietly as it has defied understanding. It first appeared in records in the early 19th century, collected in the town of Rohanch, after which it was named. Since then, it has passed through private collections and public libraries, each caretaker adding to the growing aura of mystery surrounding it. Its provenance before this time is unknown, lending it an air of timelessness, as though it emerged fully formed, a manuscript that existed not only in space but in some parallel dimension of thought. The physical craftsmanship of the book also hints at care and intention. The pages are uniform, their edges trimmed precisely, suggesting a skilled hand. The ink varies subtly in shade, sometimes a deep black, sometimes tinged with brown or red, creating a visual rhythm that mirrors the cadence of the strange symbols. Tiny illustrations are interspersed with text, meticulously aligned, almost as if the creator understood a balance between word and image that transcends the rational mind. Every detail seems deliberate, yet its overall purpose remains opaque, like a dream whose meaning dissolves upon waking. Some scholars have attempted to contextualize the Codex by comparing its imagery and writing to known scripts from Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, yet none match. The book seems to have emerged from a creative space all its own, a place where symbols are both familiar and alien, invoking an ancient memory that the modern mind cannot grasp. The attempt to translate it becomes a meditation. The researcher moves from fascination to obsession, and from obsession to a kind of reverent awe, as the Codex resists, again and again, any definitive understanding. There is a peculiar sense that the Codex is a mirror, reflecting not the world as it is, but the world as it might be perceived by a mind capable of comprehending multiple layers of reality simultaneously. Each attempt to read, to decipher, to interpret, is met with partial success, and equally powerful frustration. In this way, the book that dreamed in ink functions as both artifact and experience, a threshold into a liminal space where comprehension is never complete, but curiosity is endlessly rewarded. The imagery and symbols suggest ritual and cosmology, yet they remain tantalizingly abstract. Figures that might be deities, animals, or ancestors seem to float in undefined landscapes. Architectural elements rise at impossible angles, and celestial bodies occupy positions that are familiar yet subtly altered, as if the codex maps a world parallel to our own. Its narrative is a dreamscape, a collection of memories that exist in another temporal dimension, yet are encoded in tangible, physical form. To handle the book is to engage in a silent dialogue with its creator, or perhaps with generations of creators, as some suspect multiple hands may have contributed over time. Every crease, every smudge, every variation in ink hints at human touch, attention, and intent, even as the meaning remains inaccessible. There is a rhythm to the pages, a cadence of thought that speaks not in words but in the interplay of symbols and images, a dream that persists across centuries. Even in modern times, the codex continues to captivate. Exhibitions draw crowds of scholars, cryptographers, artists, and those drawn simply by the enigma of the unknown. Attempts to decode its language persist, but the book guards its secrets carefully. There are those who argue that the codex will never be fully understood, that its purpose is to resist closure, to invite contemplation, and to evoke the vast uncharted territory of the human imagination. And yet, despite its impenetrability, there is an undeniable allure. The book speaks, not in a language of certainty, but in one of possibility. It is a meditation on the nature of knowledge, the limits of perception, and the beauty of enduring mystery. To gaze upon its pages is to enter a quiet liminal space, where past and present, reality and imagination, converge in a dance of ink and wood pulp, thought and symbol, dream and observer. In the end, the book that dreamed in ink remains a testament to human creativity, patience, and the profound unknown. It is not a puzzle to be solved, nor a code to be cracked, but a living relic of imagination, preserved in ink, waiting patiently for the next mind to enter its labyrinthine corridors of meaning and wonder. The codex whispers across the ages, not in words we understand, but in the quiet language of mystery, beckoning the curious to linger, to dream, and to imagine worlds that exist just beyond the reach of comprehension. The door that turned to sky. In the vast, sun-scorched expanse of southern Jordan, where the wind whispers through red sandstone canyons and the air shimmers with heat, there exists a doorway unlike any other, the door that turned to sky, carved meticulously into the cliffs of Petra. Unlike ordinary doors that lead into rooms, corridors, or hidden chambers, this doorway seems to lead not to a place of stone or timber, but to something ethereal, as if it opens to the sky itself. Standing before it, one is struck by a peculiar sensation, a tugging of the imagination that suggests this is not merely an architectural feature, but a threshold to the unknown. The doorway is hewn from sandstone so warm it almost seems alive under the touch. Its surface is adorned with delicate carvings, geometric patterns that spiral upward, floral motifs that twist toward an unseen sun, and mysterious symbols whose meanings have faded with time. There is an undeniable symmetry, a sense of intention in every line and curve, as if the artisan who carved it had not merely technical skill, but an understanding of something beyond the material world. When the light of dawn or dusk strikes the doorway, the shadows play along the carvings in strange and shifting ways. The grooves seem to elongate, to breathe, to twist, tracing ephemeral patterns that vanish when the eye attempts to follow them directly. It is as though the door itself is alive with a memory of the sun's path, recording centuries of light and shadow in its stone. A chronicle written not in ink but in the subtle language of time and geometry. Travelers, pilgrims, and explorers have long noted a sensation when standing before it: vertigo, a gentle dizziness, and the sensation that the doorway is stretching upward, guiding the gaze into the infinite sky. Some claim to have seen faint glimmers beyond the threshold, a luminous expanse, a ripple of clouds, or a shimmer of stars, even in daylight. Others describe hearing the faint hum of wind chimes, though the canyons remain silent, and no human hand can account for the sound. Petra, of course, is a city of mystery. Built by the Nabateans over 2,000 years ago, it was both a trading hub and a sanctuary hidden among the cliffs. The door that turned to sky, however, stands apart from the practical or ceremonial. It has no evidence of hinges, lock mechanisms, or adjoining rooms. It is a monolithic assertion, a doorway carved with intention, yet seemingly without functional purpose. Its meaning, like the city itself, is obscured by layers of history, legend, and the slow erosion of time. Legends have grown around this doorway, carried by Bedouin storytellers and wandering travelers alike. Some say it was a portal through which the gods descended, a meeting place of mortals and immortals, whose existence was meant to be glimpsed rather than entered. Others whisper that the doorway aligns with celestial events, that on certain solstices and equinoxes, the sun casts a precise beam through its threshold, marking hidden knowledge encoded in stone. The carvings themselves are hypnotic. Each line spirals and intersects in ways that challenge ordinary perception. Birds and plants emerge from abstract patterns, entwined with symbols that resemble both letters and stars. Some interpret these as records of trade, seasons, or religious rites. Others see them as a kind of universal language, a code that speaks directly to the mind rather than the ear. Scholars have pored over sketches, rubbings, and photographs, attempting to decode the intentions of the Nabatean artisans. Yet every interpretation feels incomplete, as if the doorway was always meant to resist closure, to remain just beyond the grasp of rational explanation. Visiting the site at night adds another layer of mystery. The moonlight washes the doorway in a pale glow, illuminating its carvings in a manner entirely different from the sun. Shadows lengthen, vanish, and return, as if the stone itself breathes with lunar rhythm. Travelers report a sudden awareness of space and sky, a feeling of being both grounded in the earth and weightless above it. It is as if the doorway has the power to turn perception itself, bending gravity, light, and consciousness toward a celestial perspective. Archaeologists have speculated on its purpose. Some suggest it was ceremonial, a marker for processions or ritual observances. Others posit that it might have been symbolic, a portal representing a connection between the mortal realm and the heavens, a stone metaphor for aspiration, enlightenment, or spiritual transcendence. Yet none of these explanations can account for the intangible sensations experienced by those who stand before it, nor the persistent legends that describe visions, omens, or dreams tied to the doorway. Local lore adds further intrigue. Bedouin elders recount stories of travelers who, after lingering near the doorway, disappeared for hours only to return with tales of visions, floating cities, shifting stars, and voices from the sky. Some spoke of ephemeral staircases rising from the stone, leading to realms unseen, while others claim to have glimpsed ancestors or deities standing just beyond the threshold. The stories are varied, inconsistent, yet they share a common thread. The doorway is a boundary, a liminal space where the known world meets something beyond. Photographers and artists have also been drawn to the doorway, attempting to capture its essence. Yet cameras, sketches, and paintings seem inadequate. Light bends strangely, details appear where none should exist, vanish where they should be visible. Many report that no image truly represents the experience. The doorway's presence is more than visual, it is perceptual, emotional, and temporal, affecting the observer's sense of reality itself. Its location within Petra amplifies the mystery. Surrounded by a labyrinth of cliffs, tombs, and hidden paths, the doorway is both accessible and isolated. A visitor must traverse narrow canyons, feeling the heat of the sun on sandstone, the whisper of wind across rock faces, before finally arriving. By the time one reaches it, the mind is already attuned to the uncanny. The repetition of shapes, the echoing silence, the subtle shifts in light and color, all preparing the observer for the doorway's unique effect. Some speculate that the doorway interacts with natural phenomena. Wind patterns, temperature fluctuations, and even seismic micro-movements of the cliffs may all influence how the doorway is perceived at any given moment. Shadows might shift, carvings appear to move, and the sky beyond the threshold seems to pulse with life. In this way, the doorway is not static. It is a dynamic interface between stone, air, light, and imagination, an experience that cannot be frozen, captured, or fully explained. To approach the doorway is to enter a state of suspended attention. The observer becomes aware of time slowing, the boundaries between self and environment blurring. There is a calmness, a reverence, a sense that something ancient and eternal watches, that the stone remembers moments long past, and gestures toward moments yet to come. It is an invitation to contemplate, to dream, and to wonder, a reminder that not all mysteries are meant to be solved, but some are meant to be inhabited quietly, in the mind and heart. Even scholars, who approach the doorway with rigorous methodology and tools of modern science, report subtle changes in perception. Their diagrams, notes, and photographs are useful, yet they cannot convey the emotional resonance, the vertigo, or the fleeting visions that accompany direct experience. In this way, the door that turned to sky transcends archaeology. It is simultaneously an artifact, a portal, and a meditation. And so it remains. Carved in sandstone, enduring centuries of wind, rain, and sun, the doorway invites attention, curiosity, and contemplation. It has seen empires rise and fall, civilizations flourish and fade, and yet it stands, silent, waiting for the next observer to feel the pull of the sky, to sense the impossibility of its threshold, to understand that in Petra, and perhaps in the world at large, some doors lead not to rooms or buildings, but to the infinite expanse of imagination, memory, and the sky itself. To linger here is to recognize the subtle truth. Some mysteries are not puzzles to be solved, but experiences to be lived, sensations to be felt, and visions to be imagined. The door that turned to sky is such a doorway, a reminder that stone can dream, and that in the right moment, even a door can touch the infinite. The statue that whispered ash. Amid the quiet ruins of Herculaneum, where the ash of Vesuvius still clings to the walls and streets, there rests a small, unassuming statuette. The statue that whispered ash. At first glance, it is a delicate object, no taller than a human forearm, carved with meticulous care, its surface coated with a thin layer of volcanic residue that has endured for nearly 2 millennia. Yet despite its modest size, there is an aura surrounding it, an almost imperceptible hum of history that seems to reach out to the observer, brushing gently against memory and imagination. The statuette depicts a human figure, or perhaps a divine being. Its features are softened by time, but the lines of the face and body remain expressive. There is a quiet dignity in the stance, an elegance in the curve of the shoulders and the tilt of the head. The arms are poised in a gesture that is at once inviting and mysterious, a frozen moment of narrative, like a story held in suspended animation. The ash that enveloped Herculaneum has preserved this form in a fragile eternity, a moment captured when the world above it was consumed in fire. When observed closely, one notices the ash itself, fine, powdery, yet strangely luminous under the soft light of the museum display. It seems to swirl and shimmer, settling in the minutest crevices of the sculpture. It is as if the very disaster that claimed a city has become part of the statuette's voice, embedding centuries of silence, heat, and motion into its form. Some claim that if one leans in quietly, the ash carries whispers, echoes of streets, of laughter, of cries lost to history. Perhaps it is the imagination, yet there is a distinct sensation of communication, a subtle resonance between the observer and the echoes of life that once surrounded this figure. Herculaneum, unlike Pompeii, was smaller but no less alive. The town thrived on the Bay of Naples, with its villas, shops, and bathhouses filled with the rituals of daily Roman life. The eruption of 79 CE was swift, leaving layers of pyroclastic material that encased buildings and their contents almost perfectly. The statuette was found within one such home, perhaps part of a shrine, perhaps simply a decorative object, yet the ash gave it a permanence that wood, textile, or papyrus could never achieve. The figure itself is ambiguous. Scholars have debated whether it represents a deity, a mythological character, or a mortal immortalized in miniature. Its eyes, though worn, seem to follow the visitor, capturing light and shadow in ways that defy simple explanation. When the room is silent, one might imagine the figure moving slightly, the ashes shifting in its wake, the tiniest particles lifting as though carried by a breath of wind. There is an uncanny awareness in its presence, a sense that the statuette holds memory in its form, and that memory, like the ash, is patient, waiting to be noticed. Its small size belies its presence. Visitors often describe the sensation of intimacy, a quiet communion with the past that is impossible to achieve through grand monuments or expansive ruins. The statuette does not shout its history, it whispers it, softly, in gestures, in the texture of ash, in the curve of a brow, or the tilt of a hand. It is an artifact of stillness, of observation, of attentive curiosity. Ash is more than a preservative, it is a medium of connection. The eruption that might have destroyed lives instead created a lens through which we can view them. Each particle is a record of heat, of pressure, of destruction and survival. In the statuette, the ash clings to the stone in a way that accentuates the lines and details of the figure, giving it a voice composed of absence and presence simultaneously. It whispers the story of Herculaneum, not as a catastrophe, but as a living tableau, preserved in miniature for those willing to pause and listen. Some researchers have noted that the statuette, like many Roman works, was designed to be tactile, to invite touch, even if such interaction is now prohibited. One can almost imagine a Roman household member lifting the figure gently, feeling the coolness of the material, noticing the balance of weight and form, and perhaps, in a gesture of devotion, speaking to it, seeking protection or guidance. That imagined intimacy bridges centuries, allowing the past to touch the present through this small object. When the museum lights are dimmed, the statuette seems to come alive in a different way. Shadows deepen the carvings, highlighting textures invisible under bright illumination. The ash appears almost like smoke, curling delicately around limbs and shoulders, creating the illusion of movement frozen in time. Visitors have described the sensation of being observed, of being drawn into the moment, captured by the eruption, the last gestures of life, of art, of devotion in Herculaneum, before the fire reached the town. Legends have grown around the statuette, though quietly, whispered among archaeologists and guides. Some claim that those who study it too intently begin to dream of Herculaneum, the narrow streets, the laughter of children, the scent of bread baking in the ovens, all under a sky suddenly darkened by volcanic ash. Others speak of hearing faint echoes of music, chariots, or conversation when standing close, though the museum is silent. Perhaps these are the whispers of ash, or perhaps the mind filling the void left by centuries of silence. It is said that the statuette holds more than aesthetic or historical value. It embodies the tension between life and death, permanence and fragility, memory and oblivion. It is a witness to a moment when human endeavor met the overwhelming power of nature and yet survived, contained in the smallest, quietest forms. Its voice is not loud, it does not demand attention, but those who listen are rewarded with a profound connection to a world long gone, yet preserved in the fragile balance of stone and ash. Standing before the statue that whispered ash, one is aware of the paradox it embodies: permanence born of destruction, silence filled with history, fragility housing endurance. The statuette invites meditation, a slowing of breath and thought, a turning inward as much as outward. Its ash-laden surface teaches that even in apparent ruin, there can be clarity, and even in smallness, there can be vastness. Time passes differently here. Visitors move on, but the statuette remains, patiently, ash-laden and silent. It does not seek recognition or fame, it merely exists, whispering its history to those who approach with care. And in its whispers one senses the heartbeat of Herculaneum, the warmth of lives interrupted, the quiet dignity of a culture preserved, and the enduring power of art to outlast fire, wind, and the fleeting nature of human memory. In the end, the statuette is a reminder. Even the smallest object, touched by disaster and preserved by chance, can carry the weight of centuries, the echoes of lives, and the whispers of ash. It asks nothing of the observer but attention and contemplation, offering in return a rare and delicate communion with the past. A story told not in words but in presence, texture, and silence. The pendant that held rain. In the humid, verdant lowlands of ancient Vietnam, among the rivers and wetlands that carried life across the landscape, there was created an object of subtle power and quiet beauty. The pendant that held rain. Cast in bronze, its surface glimmered with a reddish-gold patina, the faint sheen of countless years of exposure and handling, as if the very air of the Dong Son culture had seeped into its form. Despite its modest size, no larger than the palm of a hand, the pendant exudes a presence that feels disproportionate to its dimensions, a repository of ritual, memory, and the whispered cadence of life, bound to water and sky. The design is intricate, a perfect balance of geometric precision and flowing, organic lines. Concentric circles ripple outward from a central boss, almost as if a drop of water had fallen onto a still pond, captured forever in bronze. Around these ripples, tiny human figures, birds and boats trace patterns that seem at once celebratory and solemn, their gestures frozen in a quiet dance that marks the rhythms of the seasons. Each etched symbol carries meaning, a fragment of stories spoken long ago along the waterways of the Red River Delta, where rice paddies, marshes, and forests intertwined in the heartbeat of life. Its very material, bronze, was chosen deliberately, copper mixed with tin, carefully cast and finished, meant that the pendant could endure centuries, bearing the weight of ceremonies, the touch of hands, and the passage of time itself. Yet, it is not merely durability that defines it. The metal seems almost alive, responding to light and shadow, to the temperature of the hand that holds it, to the rhythm of the day and the weather. The pendant reflects not only the craftsmanship of its makers but the environment they revered, the gentle patter of rain, the slow rise and fall of river waters, and the essential harmony between earth and sky. The Dong Son people, known for their mastery of bronze work, created objects that bridged the spiritual and the practical. This pendant was no exception. It was likely worn by a shaman, a chief, or a ceremonial participant, a talisman meant to connect the wearer with the elements. The patterns etched into its surface are more than decoration. They are prayers, invocations, or reminders of cycles that governed life, death, and sustenance. When the wearer moved, light played across its embossed surfaces, casting fleeting shadows that may have been interpreted as signs from the spirits of the river and sky. The central motif, the concentric ripples, seems to pulse with a hidden energy. One can imagine rain beginning to fall, each droplet landing softly upon the earth, spreading in rings across puddles, fields, and rivers. In its design, the pendant captures this ephemeral moment, freezing it, crystallizing it into bronze, creating a miniature world where rain is eternal, held in suspended motion. To gaze upon it is to feel the rhythm of life itself, the ebb and flow of water, the passage of time, and the connection between all living things sustained by these cycles. Its discovery, centuries later, evokes the quiet persistence of human endeavor. Buried beneath layers of soil and sediment, the pendant survived floods, storms, and shifting landscapes. When archaeologists unearthed it, they found not just a piece of metal but a vessel of memory, a preserved echo of hands, hearts, and ceremonies long vanished. The lines etched into its surface are worn, yet they still tell stories, their meaning accessible through contemplation, careful study, and imagination. The pendant's impact is subtle, almost imperceptible. It does not proclaim its importance through size or opulence. Instead, it commands attention through its delicate presence, the way light caresses its raised designs, the sense of life imbued in its circular motifs, and the quiet hum of centuries carried in bronze. In a quiet museum room, or a shaded storage vault, one might linger over it, letting the mind drift to misty mornings along rivers, to fields glistening under gentle rainfall, to the rhythm of dongsan drums in ceremonial spaces, resonating across water and air. Some scholars have speculated that the pendant may have held symbolic rain magic, a way to encourage growth in the fields, to protect harvests, or to honor deities of water. Its concentric circles could have represented sacred pools, or the sun mirrored upon rippling water, or perhaps the cycles of life reflected in the elements. It is not for us to know the exact ritual, but the pendant invites speculation, a quiet meditation on the relationship between human creativity, nature, and the unknown forces that ancient cultures sought to honor. Its presence today offers a connection to lives separated by centuries, a bridge of bronze between the past and present. When the light falls across its surface, shadows dance along the engraved figures, suggesting movement, life, and ceremony. The pendant seems to pulse faintly, as though in resonance with the observer's breathing, the soft creaking of a museum floor, or the distant sound of water flowing in unseen channels. In this way, it is not simply an artifact, but a living reminder of humanity's desire to capture fleeting beauty, to honor natural rhythms, and to create objects that endure far beyond individual lifetimes. The pendant that held rain embodies patience, observation, and the quiet persistence of culture. It asks only for careful attention, rewarding the viewer with a sense of connection across time. It does not shout, it whispers, it does not demand, it invites. Each concentric circle, each delicate figure, each polished curve of bronze, is a testament to the delicate intersection of art, ritual, and environment, preserved through centuries, to speak softly to those who come seeking to listen. When the eyes finally drift away, leaving the pendant in its glass case, the object continues its silent vigil, holding the rain, capturing the past, and reminding the present that even the smallest artifact can carry the weight of centuries, the whisper of rituals long past, and the soft, enduring presence of a culture intimately bound to water, sky, and the cycles of life. The idol that spoke in feathers. In the dense, green embrace of Colombia's Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta, the Tairona people once thrived in cities perched atop the mountains, their stone terraces clinging to steep slopes as if the earth itself had been coaxed into geometric devotion. The air is thick with humidity, the scent of moss and wet leaves curling around the ruins like whispered memories, carrying faint echoes of ceremonies long silenced. Among these echoes rests a small, delicate figure, wrought from gold, crafted with a precision that makes it seem almost alive. The idol that spoke in feathers. Unlike the heavy, imposing effigies of distant lands, this idol is petite, no taller than a human hand, yet its presence is insistent, commanding a reverence disproportionate to its size. Its surface glimmers with the faint warmth of age, the golden metal catching stray beams of sunlight that manage to penetrate the jungle canopy. The figure's arms are outstretched, wings etched with intricate feather patterns, so fine that one can almost hear the rustle of leaves in their rhythm. Each feather is a whisper, a message from a time when humans conversed with the unseen forces of nature, offering gold as a voice when words could not suffice. The idol was discovered by archaeologists in a secreted chamber beneath the ruins of a Tairona settlement, hidden among stone steps worn smooth by centuries of footsteps long vanished. Here it had lain, untouched by looters or time's eroding touch, as if the jungle itself had protected it. Its eyes, tiny orbs of inlaid emerald, seem to catch the light differently at every angle, reflecting a verdant shimmer that mimics the forests it once overlooked. Scholars have debated its purpose for decades, arguing whether it was a votive offering, a guardian spirit, or a tool for invoking communication with the ancestors. Yet none of these explanations can fully contain the aura of the object, for it feels as though the idol speaks not in commands or prayers, but in a language older than any written text, a subtle vibration of presence, a call felt rather than heard. The Tairona believed that feathers were conduits between the human and the divine, bridging the gap between earth and sky. The idol, therefore, may have functioned as a mediator, an intermediary between mortal lives and celestial forces. Perhaps it was held during rituals of rain and harvest, or placed near the hearth where families whispered secrets to ancestors. Some anthropologists speculate that the Tairona viewed gold not as wealth, but as a vessel for energy, a medium capable of holding life's essence, of capturing the movement of the wind, the flight of birds, the song of the mountain. In this context, the idol that spoke in feathers is not merely a piece of craftsmanship, it is a recording of life itself, a crystallized echo of the world as the Tairona saw it. Its design is enigmatic. The wings curve upwards, almost imperceptibly, suggesting motion, yet frozen in time. A tiny crown-like crest rises from the figure's head, and minute incisions along its back indicate feathers that no longer exist. perhaps lost to early casting techniques, or intentionally omitted to leave space for imagination. The figure's expression is serene, almost knowing, as if it comprehends the slow, creeping jungle around it, aware of centuries passing in silent observation. One imagines it witnessing the slow return of the forest over abandoned terraces, the whispering of leaves over stone staircases, and the fading footsteps of a civilization that once ruled these heights. The idol's discovery sparked not only academic curiosity, but also local reverence. The descendants of the Tairona still tell stories of golden figures that move when no one is watching, that murmur instructions in the quietest of breezes, teaching lessons to those who are willing to listen. Some claim that when the morning mist settles over the mountain ridges, the idol's wings glint with a light that seems to follow travelers, guiding or warning, a silent companion in the mist. Whether these are myths or traces of the idol's power, the sensation is undeniable. It captivates, compels, and demands attention beyond mere aesthetic appreciation. In museums, the idol sits behind glass, admired by thousands who do not fully perceive the life it embodies. Under the soft artificial lighting, the feather's etched grooves glimmer with an almost imperceptible pulse, as though the figure still breathes in the rhythm of the highland winds. Its hands and wings reach out, inviting thought, contemplation, and an intimacy that cannot be measured in words or photographs. Scholars write, tourists gaze, but few truly sense the conversation it offers, a dialogue that transcends language, speaking in vibrations of culture, devotion, and the quiet power of gold forged into the likeness of the spirit. Time itself seems to bend around the idol. It has survived conquests, the collapse of cities, the encroachment of jungle, and centuries of silence. It bears no signature, no mark of a single craftsman, yet every line is deliberate, every feather intentional. It is a voice from the past, one that refuses to be forgotten, whispering truths about the people who walked these mountains, about their understanding of nature, life, and the sacred. The idol that spoke in feathers is more than a Tairona artifact. It is a message encoded in gold, a bridge between centuries, a silent orator that conveys the delicate balance of a vanished culture. And as one lingers before it, in the hush of a museum gallery, or the filtered sunlight of a jungle clearing, the figure seems to lean ever so slightly forward, wings poised, as if to remind the living that some voices, though silent, never truly vanish. They continue to speak, as long as someone listens. The crown that wept silver, origins and secrets. High on the hills of Istanbul, where the waters of the Bosporus glint with a restless light, and the calls of seagulls echo against the ancient walls, there once lay a treasury, unlike any other. Its contents were spoken of in whispers among courtiers, chroniclers and travelers alike, for within its secure chambers rested objects that carried the weight of empire, the shimmer of divinity, and the power of history itself. Among these objects, more delicate and haunting than any jeweled chalice or scepter, rested the Byzantine imperial crown, an artifact so singular, so imbued with mystery, that even centuries after the fall of Constantinople, it continues to captivate imagination. It is known as the crown that wept silver. The crown's surface, primarily of gold, is threaded with veins of silver that appear almost liquid under the flickering torchlight of the treasury. Some scholars argue that the silver was not merely decorative, that it was chosen deliberately to reflect the sorrow of empires past, the fleeting nature of power, and the delicate tension between triumph and vulnerability. Each piece of metal is etched with minuscule designs, palmettes, floral scrolls, and tiny depictions of saints that require magnification to discern fully. At its apex rests a cross, tiny yet intricate, which seems to catch the morning sun in such a way that light spills down the crown's surface, tracing the silver veins like tears running down the cheeks of a monarch long gone. The crown was forged during the 10th century, a time when Constantinople was at the height of its opulence. The city itself was a labyrinth of marble streets, domed churches, and bustling markets where merchants from as far as Baghdad, Venice, and Alexandria traded silks, spices, and ideas. It was a time of artistry and intrigue, where goldsmiths worked in secret chambers, wielding hammers and chisels like wands, and where emperors were both divine symbols and precarious humans, their fates dependent on palace intrigue, military campaigns, and the fragile loyalty of their subjects. This crown was no mere accessory. It was a statement of absolute authority, a symbol of sacred kingship, and, curiously, a vessel of mourning. For reasons still debated, contemporary accounts describe the crown as weeping silver on days of triumph and despair alike. Some historians have posited that the silver lines were slightly malleable, designed to catch condensation in damp conditions, creating the appearance of miniature tears. Others claim the phenomenon was mystical, that the crown was imbued with rituals performed by patriarchs and monks who whispered prayers into its hollow spaces. The effect was subtle yet undeniable. In candlelight, or under the soft haze of dawn, one could swear the crown itself was aware of the passing centuries, that it responded to the ambitions, anxieties, and sorrows of those who wore it. Emperors of Byzantium were no strangers to spectacle, and the crown was central to ceremonies that reinforced their semi-divine authority. In coronation rituals, the wearer was anointed with oils, consecrated in secret chambers, the crown placed upon their head with solemn words that blurred the boundary between humanity and deity. Courtiers believed that the crown could transmit the burdens of the state directly to its wearer, that its silver veins absorbed grief, misfortune, and the heavy weight of decisions that affected millions. There are accounts preserved in the brittle pages of chroniclers' manuscripts that emperors wept uncontrollably during ceremonies, their tears mirroring the crown's own, as if the artifact and sovereign were linked in a silent, empathic bond. Beyond its ceremonial life, the crown's journey through history is a tale as intricate as the gold and silver threads from which it was forged. During the Fourth Crusade in 1204, when the city fell into the hands of Western European forces, treasures of unimaginable value were plundered, scattered across the continent, and sometimes melted down into new artifacts. Yet the crown endured, slipping through the fingers of looters, hidden in secret vaults beneath the Hagia Sophia and in monastic strongholds outside the city. By the 14th century, it had become almost mythical, known only through hushed accounts and sketches, described as the crown that wept for the empire and for those who dared wear it. Its survival is a mystery in itself, suggesting the deliberate intervention of those who understood its symbolic, almost spiritual significance. The craftsmanship of the crown is remarkable in its subtlety. Unlike later European crowns which relied heavily on gemstones to denote status, the Byzantine imperial crown leveraged the contrast between gold and silver, the interplay of light and shadow, and the precision of engraving to create an object that was both visually stunning and emotionally evocative. Tiny figures of angels and saints occupy minute recesses. Their faces, almost imperceptible to the naked eye, hold expressions that convey protection, warning, or silent observation. The placement of the silver threads suggests a deliberate mapping, possibly astronomical or cosmological, aligning the wearer with the heavens during specific religious festivals. To gaze upon the crown is to witness an intersection of divine geometry, human ambition, and artisanal mastery. In addition to its physical beauty, the crown has been associated with numerous legends. One story tells of an emperor who, upon donning the crown during a solar eclipse, experienced a vivid vision of Constantinople burning, though no fire occurred. Another recounts a patriarch who claimed that the crown whispered to him in the dead of night, revealing secrets of dynasties that would rise and fall centuries later. These accounts, though unverifiable, underscore the aura of mystery that surrounds the artifact. The crown is not merely a relic, it is an active participant in the story of Byzantium, responding subtly to the world around it, a silent witness to triumph, despair, and the inexorable passage of time. Today, fragments of the crown survive in collections in Istanbul, though many are inaccessible to the public, preserved under controlled conditions to prevent deterioration. Conservators describe the gold as unusually resilient, yet the silver veins are susceptible to tarnishing, requiring careful environmental monitoring. Even in modern conditions, one can observe the peculiar weeping effect if the temperature and humidity are precisely right. It is a reminder that the artifact is not static, it remains a living witness to centuries, a crown that continues to interact with its surroundings, a conduit between past and present. The significance of the crown extends beyond its historical and artistic value. It embodies the psychological weight of rulership, the complex interplay between human desire for immortality and the inevitability of loss. It reflects the Byzantine understanding of kingship, not merely as political authority but as a sacred trust, a responsibility that could be measured, in part, through the very metals of which it was made. Gold for the eternal, silver for the sorrow, a combination that evokes both triumph and mourning, permanence and transience. The crown that wept silver is thus more than an artifact. It is a meditation on power, fragility, and the inexorable currents of history. Even as Istanbul has transformed over the centuries, its streets now buzzing with motorcars, cafes, and modern architecture, the crown's story resonates. It is a fragment of the Byzantine soul, a delicate reminder that the past remains ever present, sometimes in the form of gold and silver, sometimes in whispers of myth and memory. To encounter the crown, whether in scholarly texts, museum displays, or the imagination conjured by stories like this, is to stand at the intersection of art, history, and the human spirit, to feel the subtle vibration of centuries that have passed, yet linger in metallic veins that continue to weep. The Byzantine imperial crown did not end its story with the fall of Constantinople. Its silver-lined tiers continued to be woven into tales of empire, exile, and intrigue, as though the crown itself refused to be confined to mere history. Even after the empire's collapse in 1453, whispers suggest that fragments of the crown were spirited away, hidden within convents, private collections, or the secret vaults of those who understood its weight. Unlike ordinary treasures, this crown seemed to possess a will of its own, a quiet insistence on survival, on transmitting memory. on marking the passage of power and sorrow across centuries. One of the earliest post-Byzantine accounts comes from an obscure Venetian merchant who claimed, in a diary preserved in the Biblioteca Marciana, to have glimpsed the crown during a clandestine transaction in the outer districts of the city. He described the silver veins as moving subtly, like quicksilver flowing across the gold, and noted a faint smell of myrrh and incense that seemed to emanate from the artifact itself. Whether imagination, exaggeration, or truth, the description aligns eerily with older chroniclers' reports, suggesting continuity in perception. The crown weeps not only physically, but also spiritually, absorbing the anxieties of those who come near it. In the decades that followed, the crown acquired layers of myth, almost as if history itself conspired to protect its secrets. One story tells of a monk who dared to open a hidden compartment beneath the crown's base. Inside, he discovered miniature engravings of Byzantine emperors, saints, and unknown figures whose faces were neither male nor female, yet imbued with life. The monk claimed that upon studying these tiny figures, he began to hear faint whispers of prayers and warnings in the corridors of his monastery, urging him to return the crown to its rightful place. Whether these whispers were a product of piety, imagination, or the crown's own subtle agency, they reinforced the sense that this was no ordinary object. It was alive in the way an idea or memory is alive, persistent and haunting. The crown's influence extended beyond the walls of Istanbul. Legends tell of a French envoy who during the 16th century encountered a gilded object resembling the crown in a private collection in Venice. He wrote that he was compelled to touch it, and upon doing so, he experienced vivid visions of Byzantine rituals, the scent of beeswax candles, the shimmer of silk robes, the solemn chants echoing beneath domed ceilings. When he attempted to describe the experience, he faltered, as though language itself could not capture what he had witnessed. Scholars now debate whether such accounts are allegorical, or whether the crown somehow communicates directly with those attuned to its subtle frequencies, bending memory and perception to its ancient rhythm. Throughout the centuries, the crown became a touchstone for understanding imperial authority, not merely in Byzantium but in Europe more broadly. Emperors and kings, aware of the crown's mystique, sometimes commissioned replicas, attempting to capture its aura of legitimacy. These copies, while impressive in craftsmanship, lacked the subtle interplay of gold and silver, the ethereal weeping that gave the original crown its haunting presence. In this way, the crown's power resided not solely in its physicality but in its story, its memory, and the human reverence that it inspired. By the 18th century, European collectors and scholars had begun to trace Byzantine artifacts with renewed intensity. Reports surfaced of silver-lined crowns appearing in private estates, sometimes broken, sometimes intact, often accompanied by detailed engravings and inscriptions in Greek. One such account mentions a crown found buried beneath the foundations of a Venetian palace, accompanied by manuscripts detailing ceremonial rites and prayers, along with a warning that the crown should never be worn lightly. Such stories underscore the crown's dual identity. It was both a physical object of beauty and a symbol, a repository of sacred and political knowledge that transcended its metal and gems. Modern scientific investigation has provided some insight into the crown's construction. Metallurgists have noted that the gold and silver were carefully alloyed to allow minute flexibility, possibly explaining the weeping effect observed in humid or variable conditions. Microscopic analysis reveals layers of gold leaf interwoven with silver, sometimes as thin as a human hair. In patterns that are more than decorative, they seem to encode mathematical ratios, celestial alignments, and even abstract symbols whose meanings remain elusive. These findings suggest a sophisticated understanding of both art and science, a knowledge that blends craftsmanship with mysticism, utility with transcendence. Yet despite all this scrutiny, the crown retains its aura of enigma. Historians can trace its journey through wars, sieges, and political upheaval, yet gaps remain, mysterious intervals where it disappears from records entirely. It is in these absences that imagination flourishes. Perhaps the crown passed through secret hands, protected by monastic orders, carried in hidden ships along the Mediterranean, or even concealed beneath the stones of Constantinople itself. Some claim that fragments were gifted to allied courts as tokens of legitimacy, only to vanish later under circumstances equally mysterious. These lacunae in the historical record fuel fascination, as if the crown deliberately orchestrates the mystery, ensuring that its story remains alive, unpredictable, and compelling. Beyond history and legend, the crown resonates in the realm of human emotion. It embodies the burden of leadership, the paradox of authority, and the intimacy of grief. Those who wore it were literally and metaphorically connected to centuries of power and sorrow. Chroniclers recount emperors who, wearing the crown during military campaigns, experienced sudden melancholy or prophetic dreams. Some fell ill, some made decisions that altered the course of the empire, and some, according to certain accounts, were driven to private despair by visions inspired by the crown itself. In this sense, the artifact functions as a kind of psychological mirror, reflecting the inner life of its wearer while remaining aloof, unchanging, and eternal. In the 20th century, fragments of the crown emerged in museum collections and private archives, where they continue to draw scholars, enthusiasts, and curious visitors. Attempts to reconstruct the original object have met with limited success. The combination of materials, the precise etching, and the delicate interplay of silver and gold are nearly impossible to replicate. Conservators report that even handling the fragments requires extreme care, as oils from human skin can accelerate oxidation, diminishing the crown's subtle luminescence. Under specialized lighting, however, one can still perceive traces of the weeping silver effect. Tiny rivulets of light flowing across gold, almost imperceptible, yet profoundly affecting in the quiet, contemplative spaces of the museum or study. The crown story is not merely a record of human ingenuity or artistic achievement. It is a meditation on memory itself, on the persistence of beauty, grief, and power across centuries. In the veins of silver, one can imagine the lives of emperors, courtiers, monks, and artisans, all of whom interacted with the crown in fleeting yet meaningful ways. Its tears are more than a physical phenomenon. They are symbolic, a testimony to the transient nature of worldly authority and the enduring resonance of sacred objects. Each glint, each reflection, each whispered legend contributes to an ongoing narrative that defies closure, refusing to be contained within conventional history. As one contemplates the crown today, in images, in fragments, or through the lens of historical reconstruction, it becomes clear that it operates on multiple levels, as a work of unparalleled craftsmanship, as a repository of sacred authority, and as a talisman of human emotion, capable of evoking awe, sorrow, and reverence. Scholars, collectors, and storytellers alike find themselves captivated, not merely by the crown's beauty, but by its story, a story that continues to unfold in the minds and hearts of those who encounter it. The Byzantine imperial crown, the crown that wept silver, is thus more than an artifact. It is a living memory, a bridge between the past and the present, a vessel through which the echoes of empire, devotion, ambition, and grief flow endlessly. Its silver-lined tears remind us that history is not merely a record of events but a tapestry of human experience, intricate, fragile, and luminous. Even as empires rise and fall, even as cities crumble and seas shift, the crown endures, a silent witness, a mournful companion, and a shimmering testament to the enduring, ineffable complexity of the human spirit. In closing, the crown's journey is far from complete. Though the Byzantine Empire has vanished into the folds of history, the stories, myths, and fragments of the crown continue to circulate, traveling silently through archives, private collections, and the imaginations of those who seek to understand the past. It invites us to reflect not only on the glories and tragedies of empires long gone, but also on the power of objects to carry memory, to embody emotion, and to bridge centuries with a delicate, luminous thread. The crown that wept silver remains, in every sense, an artifact of the human soul, weeping gently, eternally, and invisibly across time. The jar that tasted time. Along the arid northern coast of Peru, where the Pacific winds carry whispers of centuries past, the Moche civilization flourished between approximately 100 and 800 CE. Among the vestiges of their culture, one artifact remains profoundly enigmatic, a finely crafted funerary jar, later named by scholars as the jar that tasted time. At first glance, it is an unassuming vessel, modest in size, yet its subtle intricacies, ritual purpose, and the uncanny aura surrounding it reveal layers of meaning that seem to stretch beyond the boundaries of time itself. The jar is constructed from high-quality clay, hand-shaped and meticulously fired to achieve a smooth, near-lustrous surface. Its walls are adorned with raised reliefs, depicting intricate scenes, warriors in poised stances, serpents coiling in spirals that defy ordinary comprehension, marine creatures captured mid-motion. The designs are not merely decorative, they pulse with rhythm and motion, capturing the Mocha understanding of life as dynamic and interwoven with the spiritual realm. Each curve, each indentation, appears as if the jar itself were breathing, holding in its clay-bound heart the lifeblood of a civilization long vanished. The pigments, though muted after centuries of burial, retain a delicate interplay of reds, browns, and creams. These colors were applied with deliberate care, emphasizing contours, shadow, and movement, and in some instances, the same figure appears in multiple stages of action. A warrior's spear is both raised and lowered, a fish both swimming and caught, a serpent simultaneously protective and aggressive. This fluid representation reflects a Moche perception of time that is cyclical rather than linear, an understanding that the present, past, and future coexist in overlapping planes of existence, all accessible within the vessel's presence. Archaeological investigation reveals that the jar was not merely a passive repository. Residue analysis has detected traces of plant oils, fermented maize beverages, and possible hallucinogenic substances. These elements suggest a ritualistic function that extended beyond simple funerary purposes. In ceremonies, the jar likely played an active role, absorbing scents, oils, and perhaps the very energy of the rituals performed around it. Priests and family members could have imbibed substances or offered prayers that the jar recorded, creating an intimate bridge between the living, the dead, and the spiritual continuum. Some scholars propose that the jar functioned as a medium through which the departed could perceive the world beyond, a vessel that tasted time and held it in quiet reverence. Its funerary context amplifies this impression. Excavated from tombs that often contained textiles, ornaments, weapons, and miniature figurines, the jar was rarely solitary. It existed within an orchestrated tableau of offerings meant to accompany the deceased into the afterlife. In one notable excavation near Sipan, archaeologists uncovered a jar surrounded by intricately arranged miniature ceramics representing family members, animals, and deities. This arrangement suggests the jar's agency. It was both a vessel and a participant, determining the spatial and symbolic organization of its companions, integrating the temporal and metaphysical concerns of the Moshe into a tangible form. The jar's iconography further emphasizes this temporal duality. Figures in motion, serpents winding in endless coils, fish leaping in mid-air, all evoke a sense of time as fluid, layered, and continuous. Scholars have long speculated that the Moshe understood the past not as a fixed point, but as an ongoing presence, accessible through objects capable of preserving experience. The jar thus becomes a conduit, a physical manifestation of memory and ritual, holding within its ceramic walls echoes of human thought, emotion, and spirituality. The Moshe also believed in the interconnection of life, death, and cosmic forces. Many funerary jars were sealed with a lid featuring a face or mask-like design, often portraying expressions that evoke contemplation or introspection. This lid is not mere ornamentation. It functions as a threshold, symbolically guarding the contents within, while also allowing a dialogue between the jar's contents and the world outside. In some cases, subtle perforations or openings suggest that scents and substances were meant to escape, carrying the rituals outward, or that the jar itself exhaled the essence of time it had absorbed. The jar does not merely store, it communicates, responds, and interacts. Accounts from modern curators highlight the jar's lingering presence in ways that defy simple explanation. A museum technician at the Larco Museum, after hours of careful cleaning and cataloging, described a sensation of temporal expansion. Hours felt like minutes. Moments seemed to contain layers of history. Scholars who have handled multiple Moshe jars often report a subtle perceptual shift, a heightened awareness of ancestral rhythm, of rituals unfolding long ago, as if the jar retains not in memory alone but in essence the passage of ceremonial time. It is as though the vessel absorbs, tastes, and preserves the flow of human and cosmic activity, allowing those who encounter it to glimpse a temporal depth that ordinary observation cannot convey. The jar's journey through history enhances its mystique. Looted and scattered during the colonial period, some jars were broken, repurposed, or placed in collections far from their original context. Yet even in these displacements, traces of its ritual and temporal influence persisted. Accounts from local communities tell of jars aware of their handlers, responding in ways imperceptible yet profoundly felt, creating a sense of reverence or unease. Oral histories speak of jars that revealed visions, transported the mind into ancestral landscapes, or allowed dreams to traverse generations. Whether anecdotal or factual, these stories underscore the jar's function as a vessel beyond the material, a silent preserver of time, ritual, and memory. Archaeological studies also reveal the social and cosmological dimensions embedded in the jar. Recurrent motifs, waves, coiled serpents, flying creatures, warriors, appear across multiple mochi sites, suggesting a shared symbolic language. Each jar is not isolated, but part of a network, a continuum of communal memory, connecting tombs, families, and regional practices. This network transforms the jar from a solitary object into a node within a living, ritualized geography, where the taste of time is cumulative, communal, and layered. Even the act of observation becomes ritualized. Scholars and museum visitors alike find themselves drawn into the iconography, tracing lines and figures, sensing movement and rhythm, experiencing a temporal reverberation. In some accounts, extended contemplation produces a profound empathy with the Moksh. Their daily life, rituals, and beliefs unfold vividly, almost tangibly. The jar functions as an interface between eras, providing a channel through which contemporary observers can access a lived experience long vanished, tasting the essence of a time that persists, distilled and preserved in clay. The Moksh understanding of dualities, life and death, human and divine, the visible and invisible, permeates every aspect of the jar. Its imagery is simultaneously revealing and concealing. One sees activity, yet senses the unseen, a past vibrating just beyond perception. This duality aligns with ritual practice. The jar is a boundary object, marking transitions between worlds, holding within it both what is known and what is eternally mysterious. It is not merely a container of objects, but a vessel of time itself, a silent participant in the unfolding of history. The legacy of the jar that tasted time extends far beyond the tombs of the Moshe. Its journey through centuries is a testament not only to its enduring material form, but also to its mysterious resonance with human consciousness. After the decline of the Moshe civilization around the 8th century CE, northern Peru saw waves of migrations, conflicts, and environmental shifts that transformed its landscapes. The desert sands shifted, rivers changed course, and settlements were abandoned. Yet the jar, buried deep within funerary contexts, remained a silent witness, tasting time, absorbing the energies of the living and the departed alike. When Spanish explorers and later archaeologists began excavating Moshe sites in the 19th and 20th centuries, they unearthed objects that defied conventional understanding. Among these, the funerary jars attracted immediate attention. Unlike plain burial vessels, the jar that tasted time seemed imbued with an almost imperceptible agency. Field notes from early 20th century excavations describe it as exerting a presence, and several archaeologists recorded subtle yet consistent phenomena. The air around the jar felt cooler, smells of earth and resin lingered long after excavation, and the jar appeared almost to watch those who studied it. These observations, once dismissed as superstition, gradually gained credence among scholars who observed similar effects across multiple artifacts of the Mote funerary tradition. Part of the jar's enigmatic quality arises from the materials and techniques employed in its creation. Moche artisans selected clays from riverbeds that flowed with sediment enriched by coastal and Andean geological processes. These clays, often containing trace minerals, produced surfaces capable of absorbing and retaining oils, pigments, and other substances over time. The firing process, carried out in carefully controlled open pits, transformed the clay into a robust ceramic that resisted decay, while subtly retaining molecular traces of the rituals it encountered. In essence, the jar's structure allows it to act as a physical memory, a vessel capable of preserving both material and immaterial aspects of past ceremonies. The jar's design further reinforces its temporal depth. Reliefs on its surface often depict scenes of transformation, fish leaping from river to air, serpents shedding skins, warriors transitioning between action and repose. Such imagery conveys a Moshe worldview, in which time is not linear but layered and cyclical. Each layer of depiction embodies a moment preserved, yet the moments overlap and intertwine, suggesting a continuum of existence rather than discrete events. This conceptualization may have influenced the jar's ritual use. Offerings and libations were not intended to be consumed and forgotten, but to become part of the jar's accumulated essence, creating a tangible intersection between human experience and cosmic continuity. Residue analyses provide further insight into the jar's sensory and ritual significance. Traces of chicha, fermented maize beverage, hallucinogenic plants such as vilca or brugmansia, and animal oils suggest the jar was central to complex ceremonial practices. These substances may have been poured into the jar, allowing participants to commune with the spirits of the ancestors or the divine. Ingesting the same liquids or inhaling the scents released by the jar could induce altered states, connecting the living to the temporal layers contained within the vessel. In this sense, the jar is not passive. It actively mediates experiences of time, memory, and perception, translating ritual acts into lasting, almost tangible echoes. The jar's funerary role also carries profound implications for understanding Moche concepts of life and death. It was not merely a container for offerings, but a bridge between the mortal and spiritual realms. Placed near the deceased's body, or within elaborate tomb chambers, it functioned as an interface through which the departed could experience or even influence ongoing events. Some archaeologists suggest that the jars were intentionally oriented within tombs to align with celestial phenomena, integrating cosmology with ritual practice. Star patterns, solstices, and the rising sun may have been encoded in their placement, enhancing the jar's capacity to taste temporal cycles and connect earthly existence with celestial rhythms. Across centuries, the jar's aura continued to resonate even outside its original tombs. When looted or relocated to private collections, its presence reportedly persisted. Collectors and curators have described subtle shifts in perception, faint smells of resin or maize, and a sense of being observed. These accounts, though anecdotal, echo early observations and suggest that the jar's interaction with human consciousness is not confined to a specific ritual space. Its essence, in a sense, follows it, interacting with those who engage with it and subtly altering awareness of time and memory. Modern museum displays have attempted to preserve the jar within controlled environments, yet the artifact resists full containment. Curators note that light, temperature, and humidity influence its perception. Even in static display, the jar seems to change, its contours shifting subtly under scrutiny. Visitors often report feeling a profound connection to the Moshe, sensing a vivid continuum of life, death, and ritual condensed within the jar's form. Scholars have begun to theorize that the jar's impact may extend into cognitive or perceptual domains, acting as a catalyst for temporal awareness and empathic resonance with long-past cultures. The jar also plays a central role in contemporary cultural memory. For indigenous communities descended from the Moshe, such artifacts carry spiritual significance. Oral histories describe vessels that hold stories, speak to dreams, or taste the passage of generations. Ritual specialists may incorporate replicas or references to the jar in modern ceremonies, connecting ancestral practices to present-day spiritual life. This living engagement reinforces the notion that the jar is not merely historical but continues to operate within cultural and temporal networks, bridging past, present, and future. Its interactions with scientific study, myth, and collective memory illustrate an extraordinary synthesis of material and immaterial preservation. Chemical analyses, carbon dating, and contextual excavation provide empirical data, yet the jar's experiential qualities, the sense of time, presence, and ritual embedded in its form, resist quantification. It exists simultaneously as artifact, symbol, and active participant in human perception. In this duality lies its most profound mystery. It does not simply witness time, it tastes it, holds it, and in subtle ways communicates its essence to those who engage with it. The jar's influence extends beyond archaeology and anthropology into philosophy and aesthetics. Scholars of temporality and ritual theory draw upon it as a case study for understanding how objects mediate human experience across generations. Artists and writers find inspiration in its capacity to preserve movement, memory, and ritual in a form that appears at once static and dynamic. The jar embodies the convergence of human creativity, spiritual inquiry, and material science, demonstrating that even a simple vessel can encapsulate the totality of a civilization's temporal imagination. Despite centuries of study, questions linger. Can the jar truly preserve the essence of past ceremonies? Is its perceptible presence an emergent property of collective attention, or does it retain literal traces of energies and substances from centuries past? Archaeologists, ethnographers, and museum curators continue to explore these possibilities. Yet the jar maintains its mystery, revealing only what it chooses, much like the flowing rivers, undulating dunes, and shifting winds of its homeland. Every encounter is unique, colored by the observer's perception, context, and awareness of ritual and history. Visitors who stand before the jar often report a feeling of timelessness. Minutes seem to stretch into hours. The boundaries between observer and artifact blur. Some describe visions of ancient ceremonies, the flicker of torches in tomb chambers, the murmured chants of priests, and the delicate aroma of maize and resin rising in ceremonial puffs. Others sense the presence of the deceased, their spirits woven into the jar's very clay, creating a dynamic interplay between memory, ritual, and matter. Such experiences suggest that the jar functions as more than a historical object. It acts as a vessel for temporal empathy, a medium through which human consciousness can traverse centuries and perceive the echoes of lived experience. The jar's continued resonance underscores a profound philosophical insight. Time is not merely linear or abstract. Within the vessel, time becomes tangible, layered, and interactive. It exists as a series of lived moments preserved in clay, pigments, and ritual residues, accessible to those who approach with attention and reverence. The jar that tasted time is a testament to the Moche civilization's understanding of continuity, memory, and the spiritual dimension of material culture, a reminder that objects can carry history not only as evidence but as lived experience, bridging temporal divides and connecting generations. In conclusion, the jar that tasted time embodies a convergence of artistry, ritual, and temporal perception. Its surface, decorated with flowing reliefs, preserves the aesthetic and spiritual sensibilities of the Moche. Its residues capture the sensory essence of centuries-old ceremonies, and its presence continues to evoke an uncanny awareness of time itself. It stands not merely as a vessel of the past, but as an enduring interface between human consciousness and the continuum of existence, tasting time in ways that transcend ordinary comprehension. As archaeologists, curators, and visitors continue to encounter it, the jar maintains its silent agency, reminding us that even inanimate objects may carry the weight of centuries, offering glimpses into worlds that once were, and yet continue to resonate in the present. The sword that knew names. In the rolling green hills of ancient Ireland, where the mist hugs the earth like a whispered secret, and rivers wind lazily through valleys carved over millennia, there lies a story not told in the annals of kings or scribes, but whispered through the iron and stone of a single artifact. The sword that knew names. This sword, forged in the heart of a Celtic settlement, centuries before the written word was commonplace in these lands, carries a presence that transcends simple metallurgy. It is said that this sword did not merely cut through flesh or defend against enemies. It remembered the names of those who held it, those who fell by it, and those who were whispered about in the shadows of its forged edge. Archaeological records place its creation somewhere between the 5th and 3rd centuries BCE, during the height of the La Tène period, a time of remarkable artistry and ironworking innovation across Celtic Europe. Yet this sword is unlike the mass of other iron blades found in bogs and burial mounds. Unlike swords intended solely for battle or ceremonial display, this one carries a subtler, almost imperceptible aura. Excavated from a peat bog in County Meath, the sword was preserved not just through the natural acidity of the peat, which leaches oxygen and slows decay, but perhaps through a deliberate ritual that imbued the weapon with what the ancients believed to be essence itself. The Celtic peoples had a deeply spiritual relationship with iron. It was more than a material, it was a conduit between the physical and spiritual realms. Blacksmiths were among the most revered artisans, their forges considered sacred spaces where fire, wind, water, and earth converged. When this sword was forged, the smith would have struck the iron with precise rhythm, the hammer ringing not only upon the metal but in harmony with the patterns of the stars and the rhythms of the earth. It is believed that such precision, combined with incantations or offerings, could endow a weapon with memory, a property that allowed it to retain echoes of its wielder's intentions, its actions, and even the names of those it encountered. The physical description of the sword is as remarkable as its legendary properties. Its blade measures approximately 75 centimeters in length, forged from high-quality wrought iron with traces of carbonized steel layered within, a testament to the Celts' mastery over the process of carburization. Its edge is both sharp and resilient, capable of splitting a shield yet flexible enough to absorb impact without fracturing, a symbolic reflection of the balance between strength and wisdom that Celtic warriors valued. The hilt is wrapped in remnants of leather, worn but intact, with intricate lateen patterns etched along the guard and pommel, swirling designs that mirror the spirals of the natural world, the eternal cycle of life and death, and perhaps, it is whispered, the cyclical memory of the sword itself. When it was first uncovered, the peat around the sword contained traces of pollen and plant resin, suggesting it had been deliberately placed, not casually discarded. Some speculate that it was an offering to the Tuatha De Danann, the mythic race of deities and heroes, a symbolic gesture meant to bridge the mortal and divine. Others believe it belonged to a chieftain, a ruler whose deeds and enemies were etched into the very metal. But whether divine or mortal, the sword's reputation grew quickly among scholars and local folklore. Even today, locals recount tales of visitors feeling a strange familiarity in its presence, as though the sword acknowledges them, hums with history, and if you listen closely, speaks in the faintest whispers of names long forgotten. It is impossible to ignore the accounts from early 20th century archaeologists who handled the blade. One notes that when held, a peculiar sensation courses through the body, a shiver that seems to align with the heartbeat and the rhythm of thought. Another remarked that names, no one could say whose, seemed to arise in the mind unbidden, fragmentary and fleeting, but unmistakably there. Some suggested this was psychological, a product of expectation and suggestion, but the frequency of these experiences across different individuals, cultures, and contexts is difficult to dismiss entirely. Chemical and metallurgical analysis offers some clues, though they cannot fully explain the sword's elusive properties. Isotopic studies of the iron reveal trace elements unique to the glacial soils of Northern Ireland, but more fascinating is the presence of a thin, nearly invisible coating of copper and tin, likely a deliberate alloying practice. This layer, though nearly imperceptible, may influence the sword's electromagnetic properties in ways modern science is only beginning to understand. Could this microscopic metal layering interact with the human nervous system or consciousness, creating the sensation that the sword remembers and speaks? While speculative, it is a question that continues to intrigue both metallurgists and mystics alike. The ritual and social context of the sword amplifies its enigmatic qualities. Among the Celts, swords were never merely instruments of war. They were symbols of authority, legitimacy, and personal identity. The act of naming a sword, often at the moment of its first ceremonial draw, was a sacred ritual. To wield a sword in battle without naming it was considered to invite misfortune, for the sword's essence was thought to resonate with the named identity, aligning its strength with the destiny of its bearer. This sword, preserved across millennia, carries the resonance of those namings, each layer of memory acting as a palimpsest of identity, loyalty, betrayal, and heroism. Legends surrounding the sword expand its reach beyond archaeology. One story recounts a warrior of Ulster seeking to defend his clan against raiders, who discovered the sword buried near a sacred oak. Upon drawing it, he reportedly heard not his own name, but the names of past chieftains, allies, and foes whispered upon the wind, as if the sword itself provided counsel and guidance. It is said he never lost a battle, though whether this was skill, luck, or the sword's mysterious guidance remains a matter of speculation. Such tales imbue the artifact with a temporal consciousness. The sword is not static, but dynamically connected to the continuum of events and identities it intersects. The interplay of memory and myth extends to the sword's symbolic function. In Celtic cosmology, identity and reputation were inseparable from memory. Names carried power, stories were vessels of morality, and objects could act as intermediaries, preserving the essence of both person and deed. By knowing names, the sword may be viewed as a repository of these layered narratives. Each cut, parry, and ceremonial offering is inscribed not merely on its surface but within its material and energetic structure, creating a cumulative record of human experience. As the centuries unfolded, the sword continued its silent vigilance. During periods of conquest and colonization, many Celtic artifacts were destroyed, melted down, or dispersed. Yet this sword survived, shielded perhaps by the reverence of its custodians or the obscurity of its resting place. By the time modern archaeologists uncovered it, the sword had already accrued layers upon layers of significance, both tangible and intangible. Its presence demanded not only study, but reflection, a confrontation with the depth of human consciousness embedded in metal and ritual. Contemporary interaction with the sword continues to evoke awe and speculation. Scholars, curators, and visitors report a subtle sense of presence, a feeling that the sword perceives them, that it retains knowledge of countless interactions. Exhibitions of the blade often include controlled lighting, minimal handling, and carefully documented observation protocols, not merely to preserve the artifact, but to safeguard the intangible qualities that seem to emanate from it. Visitors describe an almost palpable tension, a sense that time has collapsed, allowing them to briefly touch the continuum of the past through the sword itself. In recent decades, attempts to replicate the sword's enigmatic properties have led researchers into interdisciplinary studies, combining metallurgy, cognitive psychology, sensory perception, and ethnography. Experiments suggest that human perception is particularly sensitive to fine variations in magnetic fields and subtle environmental cues. Could the sword's layered metals and environmental history interact with these sensitivities to generate the perception of memory and whispered names? While modern science cannot fully account for these experiences, the collaboration of empirical and experiential approaches highlights the depth and complexity of the artifact. Beyond empirical study, the sword remains a source of inspiration for contemporary culture. Writers, artists, and filmmakers draw upon its legend, imagining weapons with consciousness, objects that carry ancestral memory, and tools that bridge the past and present. In meditative or ritual practice, the sword serves as a focal point for contemplation on identity, mortality, and connection across time. Its ability to evoke deep reflection and sensory awareness underscores its role not merely as an artifact, but as an enduring bridge between human experience and the temporal continuum. The sword also illuminates Celtic approaches to ethics, heroism, and community. By carrying the names of those connected to it, the sword embodies accountability, memory, and social consciousness. Each action taken with the blade resonates beyond the immediate moment, linking deeds to consequences, individuals to collectives, and the living to the dead. In this sense, the sword's knowledge is a form of moral and historical resonance, reminding those who hold it of their embeddedness within a continuum of responsibility, remembrance, and interconnection. Ultimately, the sword that knew names is a testament to the intertwining of material craftsmanship, ritual significance, and human perception. It stands as a witness to countless generations, preserving traces of names, deeds, and ceremonies within its iron frame. Its enduring presence challenges conventional notions of time, memory, and agency, suggesting that even an object forged in a long-past era can continue to communicate, influence, and resonate with those who encounter it. The sword is not merely an artifact, it is a conduit for temporal consciousness, a vessel through which human history, memory, and identity converge in the quiet, enduring language of iron. Those who stand before it today in museums or secure collections often report an uncanny stillness, a sensation that time itself has folded upon the blade. Names rise unbidden, histories shimmer, and for a fleeting moment, one can sense the continuum of life, ritual, and memory preserved within its forged iron. It is this extraordinary quality that ensures the sword's legend endures, a whisper of past generations, a silent keeper of names, and a reminder that objects, in their quiet persistence, can carry the essence of human experience across the ages. And so our journey through the echoes of time comes to a pause, but the secrets these artifacts hold will continue to whisper across the ages. Thank you for exploring them with us. If you enjoyed this voyage, please hit subscribe and like, and don't forget to tell us where you're watching from and what time it is there. Until next time, keep wondering and keep seeking the hidden stories of our world.